perfect stillness. The small creature sounds begin, the quiet scurry of a night lizard moving over the distant cool sand, the far-off soft hushed hoot of a desert owl. These sounds are integrated into the silence. They do not disturb the stillness. They simply confirm the constant slow life of the desert night air of the vast hush choir of the outback. The body is heavier still, the head is heavy. Neck muscles release their hold completely. The jaw is soft and slack. The tongue rests heavily. In the mouth, every of you is settling down, settling deep down, following the slow spiral of sleep. The thoughts that arise are gentle, slow-moving images like water moving across polished ancient rock. They are the first whispers of the night's own. Journey's dreaming begins to assert itself. It is a landscape of profound amber color and deep hush meaning you are walking the songline in your sleep, no guided by the rhythm of the breathing beside you, guiding echoes of the ancient song. In your memory, the journey continues in the safest realm, the realm of the guided deep rest. Allow your eyelids to feel sealed, shut heavy, and perfectly still. The darkness is total. Now the calm is absolute, no effort required, only acceptance of the heavy pull of sleep. You are completely surrounded by the stillness of the world. A great stone holds you fast and secure. The velvet darkness cradles the mind gently. The slow, long breathing leads you down into the quietest, most profound sleep. The scent of the ironwood smoke from the small ceremonial fire nearby a soft light, now embers glowing red like distant, ancient ice red. Like the silent heart of the stone itself, the smell drifts over a warm, dry, comforting scent of the bush it wraps around the resting basia, final invisible protective layer. The energy of the day has been fully absorbed. The residual heat is gone. The effort is released only. This hushed, profound, peaceful state remains. The feeling of belonging here is complete. You are one small, perfect piece of the ancient land resting safely on the great sleeping body of the earth. The stars draw their slow, long arcs across the black dome. Time becomes meaningless. Here only the steady, slow rhythm of the breath exists. Inhale deeply, no hold. For a moment of quiet and release the breath, slowly, letting go of all remaining awareness, letting go of the waking world entirely. Are sinking now without effort, guided by the silent maps of the stars and the ancient knowledge of the songline, leading you always sinking down into the softest, deepest night. Cool breath of the shelter enveloped Thema, vast stone chamber, carved not by human hands but by the soft, relentless flow of water over eons. Marmong paused at the threshold, the air inside hushed heavy with the weight of uncounted seasons. Kira followed, sinking instantly into the velvet shadow. The contrast shattering the glare of the dye outside. The sun had been a burning hammer inside. It was a slow amber lamp tracing patterns, and the curved ceiling of ancient rock bees stood on sifted red sand dust that had settled here millennium after millennium each. Grain holding the memory of a storm or a drought. Marmong pointed, not speaking at first, allowing the silence to become a teaching itself. Kira looked up. The ceiling was cloaked in stories, not stories written in lines, but stories breathed onto the stony ochre, red, white, charcoal, black, yellow. Earth figures danced across the rock face, frozen forever in the act of moving, singing, hunting, dreaming. Thee were the ancestors' spirits solidified etched deeply into the sandstone heart. A deep silence settled on Kira, a silence deeper than the desert night. It was the sound of the world listening to slow drip of a tiny spring hidden somewhere high above you, a single thread of moisture maintaining life in this immense dry place. Marmo, as hand moved slowly over a panel of figures, long and slender, lines simple yet powerfully suggesting motion. These were the Wangina spirits. He finally murmured, his voice low, rhythmic, a slow wave breaking on the shore. Hey, brought the rain. There, the rain itself came from the sea. They filled the rivers. Look closely, child, look at the eyes. Eyes of the Wangina were huge, dark, empty sockets, eyes that saw everything yet held nothing, eyes that understood the deep mystery of water, crucial necessity of flow and absenchethi. Painting itself felt cool to the touch, a layer of soft pigment clinging impossibly after centuries. Reached out, not quite touching, grasping the ancient skin of the earth. Saw how the red ochre had been mixed. It was heavy, rich, deep red, like dried blood, the color of the earth mother herself. The white pigment derived from calcified clay, was brilliant stark. Against the dark stonite represented the clouds, the mist, the bone. The spirit's purity, Marmung stepped further into the cave's depths. Light growing dimmer, forcing Kira to rely on her inner side. Songline continued here, deep beneath the ground. It did not follow the surface tracks. It followed the veins of the earth, the flow of the water table. Ancestral route of the underground river spirit stopped before a recess, a smaller, darker opening inside this small alcove. The air was noticeably cold air, a chill that felt not like temperature, but like time. This is where the water sleeps, he said, where the knowledge of the deep soak is stored. The walls here were polished, smooth by years of hands, touching, not rubbing the images away, but honoring their presence. There were no complex paintings, here only symbols, simple, ancient repetitive spiral circles, within circles lines leading nowhere, and everywhere these spirals. Here, these are the wealthy. Track the underground currents, they map the thirst. Each spiral represents a place where the water spirits settle, where digging will yield the cool reward. Do not dig randomly, we sing the line. Follow the ancestors' path laid down in the stone. Kira knelt down, sinking into the red dust it felt. Soft, cushioning, peaceful. Tried to hear the songline, not just with her ears, but with the solace of her feet. With her hands, she remembered the intense heat of the day before. Desperate thirst. The knowledge that life depended on this secret map. Spirals seemed to hum faintly in the absolute darkness. Marmung began a chant, a slow, repetitive series of vowel sounds. Each note resonated deep in the chest, not the throat, a low frequency sound meant to wake the stone itself. Chant was hypnotic, utterly calming. It folded over the space, folding the air. It seemed to travel outwards, bouncing off the cold stone, then returning inwards, carrying the scent of damp earth. Kira closed her eyes. The images of the Wangina still burned brightly behind her eyelids. Silent, accusing eyes of the Rainbringer felt the earth beneath her shifting slightly. Perhaps it was her own perception shifting. Awareness that the stone was not inert, it was breathing. Slowly, glacially, the story of the walkabout journey was not merely moving across land, it was moving through time, mixing layers of consciousness stored in the land itself. Marmong's song deepened, becoming more guttural, more routine, was invoking the spirit of the hidden soak, the knowledge of where the water lay waiting beneath. The crust gestured towards a faint discoloration on the alcove flora. Small patch, where the sand was slightly darker, perpetually moist. This is the sign, he whispered. During a break in the chant, subtle promise, the earth keeps it, is here we learn patience, we learn timming. Do not demand water, we ask for it, humbly, for it owns us. We do not own. Ith reached into his small leather pouch, pulling out a pinch of finely ground ocherite. Was a soft golden amber color. Carefully blew the powder onto the moist spoda, slow, offering a prayer for permission. Dust settled gently, clinging to the dampness. It was a beautiful ritual, slow, deliberate, deeply respectful. Kira watched every movement, understanding that this was the core lesson. Difference between surviving and belonging, difference between and receiving. Thought about the sounds outside. The kavidi, slight rustling of the acacia leaves in the slow afternoon breeze, distant call of a black cockatoo. Her inside the sounds were internalized. They were the sounds of her own breath. Beat of her own heart, keeping time with the ancestral rhythm. Marmung began to speak about the star show. The movement of the celestial river guided the land river. Knowledge systems were intertwined. They mirrored each other. When the seven sisters rise early in the southern sky, it means the subterranean flow is strong. It means the earth holding its breath, ready to releaseth ancient people. Track the darkness of the sky. Places where the stars were absent were just as important as the shining constellations themselves. These dark spaces, he said, are the water holes of the sky. They are the reflection of the soak. We are now kneeling. Meditative teaching was vast, oceanous. It was impossible to absorb all at once. He required slow contemplation, years of returning to the same spot, years of feeling the same cold stone, years of watching the same star pattern. Kira felt a profound sense of peace settle over here, a quiet understanding that her journey was endless. It was not meant to finish. It was only meant to continue flowing like the unseen rivers leaned back against the cool velvet stonewall. Her body relaxing, completely trusting the earth to support her. Pressure of the walkabout, the necessity of performance ill that tension dissolved, and the hushed air was simply a listener. Now a vessel waiting to be filled and murmured began. To detail the lineage of the water song glittering, the elders who had maintained this specific track, men whose voices had carried this melody over the dry plains. Names were a litany of history, a slow drumbeat of connection drill. Google word, each name was a landscape or responsibility. Kira tried to memorize the sequence, allowing the names to settle like the amber dust on the damp earth. The songline was not fixative, it was living. It required constant tending, constant singing. If the song was forgotten, the water would forget. Where the recent link between human memory and environmental survival was. Absolutely, it was a shared destiny. Mumu moved his hand across the wall toward the deepest corner where the light barely reached, even though revealed a small carving high up above head height. It was a single perfect impression of a human. Hand-etched centuries ago, perhaps thousands of years or slow. Quiet sign of presents this is the touch of the first elder, he said, one who found this resting place well. Map the spirals, and name the darkness, place our hands where his hand rested. Take the cool strength from the stone, Kira. Rose slowly, feeling the stiffness leaving her muscles, the cool air rejuvenating her, stretched her arm. High reaching for the faint outline of the handprint, it was rough, yet comforting. Beneath her fingers a direct line to an unfathomable pasture, imagined the first manually exactly, where she knelt no tired, thirsty, but filled with the triumph of discovery of finding the secret heart of the water. Air inside the alcove seemed to compress around here, a heavy concentration of spiritual energy took. A deep, slow breath holding the scent of damp earth and ancient oak reed, scent of perpetuity, stayed in the shelter as the sun outside began its slow decline. External light shifted from amber gold to a soft rose copper, change visible only in the way the shadows deepened outside the cave mouth. Marmon did not rush. The instruction moved slowly through the art panels, detailing the specific meaning of the totems. Lizard totem representing speed and adaptability. Emu totem represent family care and the nurturing of eggs. Each animal was not just a creature, it was a verse in the songline, a guidepost, a moral lesson. Amu taught them to manage resources wisely to ensure the young were fed before the lizard. Taught them to endure the midday heat-o, find the smallest crevices of shade and moisture. Hours flowed past like thick honey, slow, unhurried. Kira felt the fatigue of the long journey finally easing, gripless by a deep, profound tiredness of the soul, kind of weariness that comes from true understanding. She sat cross-legged, gazing at the etched stone figure as they seemed to move slightly in the dimming. Light not actually moving, but suggesting movement. Dance of the Wandina was eternal. Marmo took a piece of charcoal from the fire pit remnant nearby. It was cold, smooth black velvet to the touche. Gently drew a simple line on the rock beside an already existing faded image. It was a line representing the boundary of the current wet season. Flow a gentle update to the ancient map, wet our story to the great story, he explained. Do not overwrite. We extend, we honor knowledge is never static, it must be maintained. It must reflect the current state of the earth. Kira watched the simplicity of the action. The immediate connection between the human hand and the rock face height was not vandalism. It was conservation story. It was always being retold, adapted, whispered anew, then showed her the tools. The ancestors had used them all flat grinding. Stone stained red and yellow pellets for mixing the ochre with water or spit simple brushes. Made from frayed twigs or human hair, the effort required to create these vast galleries was immense. Lifetime of slow, deliberate work painting represented. Not an afternoon project, but an act of devotion, an entire generation contributing to the library of the land. That silence returned heavy and absolute. Leaned against the stone, watching the light drain away. Soon the full darkness would arriveth. Darkness that swallowed the desert complete alive. Air grew colder, pulling the heat out of their bodies, but the stone radiated a stored warmth, a memory of the day. Kira knew they would sleep here tonight in the absolute protection of the ancestors. Stone cradle lay down on the red sand, pulling her woven mat closer. Ground was firm, unforgiving, yet infinitely reliable. Could hear the tiny movements of the cave dwellers, a faint scuttling of a lizard seeking a crack, a soft rustle of dry grass brought in by rodents, sounds of the living world continuing its slow duty. Marmung began to hum not a chant, but a lullaby, a slow, melodic repetition of 3 notes. It was the song of the journey, its self-walking rhythm, the breathing rhythm. The sleep rhythm. Kira closed her eyes, sinking deeper into the soft red dust. Weight of the etched stories pressed gently down on her chest. Reassuring spiritual pressures visualized the spirals, the water wells, deep beneath the stone, imagined. The water flowing infinitely, slowly moving through layers of sandstone and clay. Continuous journey below the earth's surface just. As her journey continued above, the coolness of the cave became a heavy blanket. Sound of Marmung's soft humming became the sound of the wind whispering across the plains outside it. History, the knowledge, the responsibility of these vast concepts dissolved into the immediate comfort of the shelters breathed in the ancient. Scent of ochre and dust and watera. Scent of timeless belonging. Her mind drifted slowly, floating above the stone floor, watching the shadows deepen in Murgith. Stars were beginning to appear outside the cave mouth, pinpricks of brilliant light in the velvet black sky, reflecting the water holes hidden below. Kira slept, not with the anxious sleep of the traveler, but with the deep restorative sleep of the keeper, guarded by a silent eyes of the Wanjinath, ancient painted figures on the rock wall, cloaked in darkness, but eternally. Awake, eternally watchful, waiting for the slow return of the rain, waiting for the continued. Songs drifted further down into the deep well of rest, where the songlines continued even in the silence of dreams. Cool stone held her safe until the rising sun would paint the cave mouth with amber light, calling her slowly back to the continued path. Journey flowed on, infinitely gentle, endlessly, slow thrill. The hushed chambers of the sleeping earth, rhythm of the desert night cradled. Here a soft velvet darkness. The air shifted, thin dust settling on the velvet tongue of quiet this small room beneath. The ruins was neither cold nor open, but hushed, compressed, heavy with the weight of unseen years. The walls were not rough stone, but fitted cedar, darker than burnt sienna, smelling faintly of spice, and the dry decay of potent oils, amber. Light pooled thick and slow against the etched wood grain, marking patterns that defied geometry, spirals that turned inward until they disappeared entirely into a singular black point. The object resting on the central plinth was small polished obsidian, carved with 3 concentric rings. Was warm, now pulsing faintly against the palm where the hand had rested, touching, sensing, feeling the cold memory of its purpose. It was not a clock, not a compass, but something that measured the distance. Between stars and sorrow, the hum started low beneath the floorboards. A sound like sand falling through the narrow neck of an ancient hourglass. Endless, slow, inevitable, the cedar walls seemed to breathe in response. The air drawing tighter around the throat, the lungs moving slower, measured against the earth's own pulseway, were far beneath the familiar bedrock, now cloaked in the silence of deep history, where the Roman stone gave way to something older, something geological, perhaps something pre-human following. The hum, the gaze, fell to the floor, where the rings of the obsidian object were replicated in silver inlays. The warmth intensified. The silver line began to glow, the light bleeding out slow like syrup, tracing the edges of a hidden seam. Seam was the door disguised as shadow, disguised as flaw. Slid open without friction, without sound, revealing not a cramped shaft, but a wide descending ramp cut directly into pure white marble. This marble felt cold intensely, so almost painful to touch, and it shimmered with a faint internal light, the luminosity of deep-sea creatures. We moved onto the ramp, stepping lightly, careful not to disturb the fragile equilibrium of this hushed place. The descent was long, deliberate, slow. It spiraled down and down, the air pressure changing until the ears popped a muffled reminder of the immense weight above us. Here, the scent was of ozone and wet granite, the taste of metal sharp on the tongue. This was the mechanism of the architects, the final repository of their deepest knowledge, not stored on scrolls or libraries, but etched into the very framework of the earth itself. The carvings along the white marble ramp were unlike anything seen before. They were not hieroglyphs, not letters, but flow diagrams, complex schematics, illustrating energy transfer and gravitational pull. They showed how the weight of the city above was used not just as foundation, but as power source, a massive, endless, slow engine. We passed through 3 distinct levels, each marked by a distinct change in the sound. Level 1 was the hum, low and steady. Level 2 was the whisper, thin and high like wind catching. The edge of a mountain peak. Level 3, where we paused, was the drone, deep vibrating, settling in the chest cavity. A resonant note that felt like truth itself. The marble ramp ended abruptly, not in a chamber, but at the edge of vastness. The space opened. Before us, cavernous, impossibly large, it was a subterranean ocean, a massive lake extending into infinite blackness beyond the reach of any light source. Ceiling was so high, it was invisible, lost in the oppressive gloom. The air here was damp, heavy, saturated with the mineral scent of deep water, and the water itself was utterly still, utterly silent. It did not reflect light. It absorbed it, drinking the faint marble luminescence until the surface was pure liquid shadow. We stood at the lip of the stone dock, a narrow walkway extending 10 paces out over the water. Stone here was basalt black and porous rough, underfoot a harsh contrast to the smooth velvet marble of the ramp. There was a boat waiting. It was flat-bottomed, shallow, drafted, made of dark, heavy wood, perhaps ebony, polished by time and water. It was tied loosely to a single iron ring set into the basalt dock. A single pale lantern rested in the center of the boat, its flame burning steady despite the heavy stillness. The light cast long, slow-moving shadows on the water, giving the illusion of movement where there was none. This was the crossing, the final stage of the architect's path. We untied the heavy rope, the knot. Stiff, reluctant to yield, pushing the boat gently onto the black liquid was like pushing against velvet resistance. Slow, heavy yielding, stepping in, felt perilous. The boat swaying slightly, a small, fragile boundary between the air we breathed and the crushing depth below. We sat still, waiting for the eyes to adjust to the overwhelming dark, the ears straining for a sound that was not the deep drone in the chest there. There was no wind down here, no current, no ripple. The silence was absolute, heavy-weighted. Perfect. Then the sound returned, not the drone, not the hum, but something new, something originating from the water. Itself a single note sung low-pitched, mathematically pure. It was sustained, held impossibly long, defying the natural capacity of lungs. Or instrument, it was the sound of a massive bell ringing miles away under fathoms of stone and water. We took up the single paddle, its surface smooth and cold. Motion was slow, deliberate, the paddle barely disturbing the liquid shadow it passed. Through the boat glided soundlessly across the surface, following the faint guidance of the unseen note. Further we moved from the basalt dock, the more overwhelming the feeling of space became. We were sailing an inner sea, an inverted ocean held. In the palm of the earth, the coldness intensified, round the knees rising up from the water. Note and repeated, rhythmic, slow, hypnotic hint. Seemed to emanate from a specific point far ahead, perhaps miles away, where the ceiling might finally meet the water in the darkness. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the pattern of the note became clear. It was a signal, a pulse. It was broadcasting information into the immense subterranean blackness. We were navigating by frequency, by resonance, by a pitch so low it vibrated through the marrow. Then the pattern shifted slightly. Single sustained note broke into two, a harmony so complex, so perfectly tuned, it felt like the very definition of balance. The lantern light flickered. Suddenly, violently, the small flame stretching thin, then recovering its steady glow, and for a moment, in that fleeting change of light, the black water was not entirely black. Something moved beneath the surface, a shadow impossibly large, fast stretching. Far beyond the confines of the small boat, it was slow, immense, deliberate. Did not break the surface, did not displace the water, but it transmitted its presence through sheer massa. Slight heavy wave, barely perceptible, rolled beneath. The keel rocking, the boat with a gentle, almost cradling motion. The movement was too large to be fish, too smooth to be rockfall. It was something contained, something living, perhaps something mechanical, perhaps something entirely unknown housed in this deep water. Singing note intensified, a welcome or a warning, we could not tell it. Seemed to be directing the boat not to a shore or a cave, but to the very center of the immense hidden reservoir. As the boat drifted closer to the point of origin, the light of the small lantern revealed something floating on the surface. Just ahead, it was not wreckage, not wood. It was pale, almost translucent white and perfectly circular. It floated unmoving, entirely still, reflecting the faint lantern light like polished stone or ancient pearl. The pure note sang out closer, now almost touching the hull of the boat. The large shadow lingered beneath the water. Massive, steady, waiting, we reached out the paddle to touch the floating white circle, to discover its nature, its purpose in this deep, hushed place. The touch was soft, yielding like damp parchment, yet solid like compressed ash. And the surface of the circle began to glow softly from within, radiating the purest white light, a slow, spreading illumination against the oppressive black liquid. The light revealed the face of the water, instantly clear to an unbelievable depth far below the keel, and the shape beneath. U.S. The source of the immense shadow was revealed not as a creature or a machine, but as a structure, a city made of polished dark stone, resting perfectly preserved at the bottom of the abyssal lake. Its towers rose silent, massive, etched into the deep floor, silent, forever cloaked in darkness, waiting for the singing note to wake them once more. White circle pulsed in the hand, throwing more light, revealing the closest tower. It was impossibly tall, its peak reaching hundreds of feet up towards the keel of the boat, and etched into the very pinnacle of that submerged stone spire was a single massive closed eye. The water parted around the stone city, the current finally awakening, flowing around those ancient structures. The boat was drawn slowly, gently toward the illuminated white disk, toward the center of the deep dark lake. The stone eye remained closed, watching nothing, waiting only for the continuous hum to guide its endless sleep. We drifted, pulled by the sound and the strange quiet. Current sinking closer to the secret heart of the subterranean sea, wondering what terrible thing would happen when the eye finally opened at deep night settled across the desert. Flora silence so profound it felt like velvet, heavy and soft. It pressed gently down upon the campsite, upon the few low embers of the fire, upon the sleeping forms stretched out beneath the endless bowl of stars. Sky was a hushed canvas, entirely black except for the brilliant white spilled milk of the Galaxia River of ancestors flowing overhead. Marking the path we still followed there was cool, now carrying the crisp scent of dry red earth and distant gum levays, a quiet breath drawn by the ancient continent itself. Your breathing slows, matching the slow, steady pulse of the cooling sand. You feel the weight of countless centuries beneath you, stone beneath the soil, holding secrets that predate memory, while you, the elder, sat unmoving near the dying fire. His silhouette, etched against the faint amber glow, was a fixture of the land himself, ancient and immovably a sentinel, watching the subtle movements of the night wind. Firelight was shy, it barely reached the surrounding spinifex clumps, casting long, trembling shadows that stretched and retracted like living things. Only sound now was the soft settling of Asha, delicate whisper that vanished instantly into the deep hush. Listen closely to that silence, that vast empty space. It is not truly empty, it is filled with song. Notes vibrate at a frequency too low for hurried ears, of foundational rhythm, the heartbeat of the dreaming. It wraps around you, a protective cloak woven from starlight and ancestral knowledge. Let the vastness of the Australian night cradle. You'll feel the pressure lift from your shoulders, feel the hurried thoughts drift away like smoke ether. There's no hurry here, there is only now, and the timeless connection were cloaked completely in the darkness, the safe, comforting darkness. Sand is cool beneath your hands, soft and finely grounded, holds the warmth of yesterday, but promises the deep coolness of the night. While you shifted imperceptibly, a slow settling of boncious eyes were open, gazing into the deepest heart of the amber, seeing not fire, but memory, seeing the first fire as the first journey is traversing the songline, even in stillness. Spirit walking the etched pathways of his ancestors. See, watch the fire die down slowly, slowly, like a deep breath, exhaling each ember, shrinking, fading from amber to deep red, then to cold gray ash. Color goes out of the world, and only the shapes remain. Sharp outlines of the low scrub, the gentle curve of the dune nearby, the immense dome of the sky stretching infinitely. Sleep comes slowly here, it arrives on the wings of the hushed night. Owlet settles like the fine dust settling after a long dry day, deepening your connection to this slow, patient land. Journey continues even in sleep. The path is held firm in the mind. Story is whispered into the earth. During the day resonate softly. Through the night, morning begins not with sound, but with the lifting of the black cloak, a subtle softening of the eastern horizona. Deep bruised purple, that bleeds into dusty rose wallow. Moves first stirring from his stillness, slow unwrapping from the blanket of ninth tends to the fire. With quiet reverence, adding thin, dry sticks, smoke rises straight and thin, piercing the cool morning. Ere it is slow work, deliberate and unhurriedly. Action is a ritual, a recognition of the gift of warmth and light. Color returns to the landscape. Slowly, slowly, like blood returning to cold hands, red ochre of the earth begins to assert itself. Pale green silver of the eucalypt leaves catches. The first angled lighta, delicate amber spread across the eastern edge of the world, rise stiffly, stretching out the fatigue of the previous day's long walk. Water is cool, a refreshing shock against the face. Wallow points westward without speaking direction. Is known the songline dictates the way. There is no discussion, no need for maps. Or planning path is etched into the very core of his being. It flows through his veins. It settles in the deep grooves of the stone country headway. Pack up the few simple belongings, the leather bags, the tools, the grinding stones, the water containers, everything. Is handled with careful slowness, no rattling, no sudden noise to disturb the quiet majesty of the awakening desert. Begin the walk just as the sun clears. The horizon is not a rush toward the heat, but a gentle glide into the nude shadows. Are long and thin, stretching far across the flat landor. Piers appear elongated, distorted giants, walking on stilts of shadow. Pace is slow, the true pace of the walkabout, 1 foot placed deliberately in front of the earth, motion, no frantic energies, is traditional, slow, travel. The movement is meditationary step, a soft acknowledgement of the earth beneath feel. The sand under your worn leather sandals or your bare feet gives slightly. Cool and firm dust rises, only slightly fine red powder puffing gently away with each placement. Sound is minimal, a soft shuffling rhythmic. Hypnotic shuffle, the steady beat of the journey while you walks ahead, his gaze fixed far. In the distance he is not looking at the horizon, but through it into the layers of time, seeing the ancestral travelers who walked this exact path. Millennia, Agathir footprints faded into the eternal dust, her song still echoing in the hollows. Of the ancient Stanu follow a barely perceptible track, a trace known only to those who know the Songlines curves around low scrub, avoiding the thickest spinifex leading. Toward a line of low reddish hills, far off these shimmer slightly in the rising heat, a mirage of solidity. Sun climbs higher, slowly, relentlessly, transforming the amber light to brilliant gold. Air warms quickly, losing its morning crispness, move into the steady rhythm of the desert day. Heat will soon press down, but now the walking is quiet, effortless, almost floating focus, only on the slow, deliberate swing of your arms, movement of your shoulders. The deep, slow breath in and out and out and out, steady. As the desert wind, silence returns, not the silence of deep night, but the quiet of midday expectant side. Sounds are few and far between. Distant cry of a raptor circling high above, almost invisible against the blue, faint rustle of dry grass. Disturbed by a small lizard, these small sounds only emphasize the overwhelming quiet. Wallu begins to hum a very low tonight. Is not a loud song, merely a vibrational reminder of the path. It is a sequence of notes that map the rocks. The water holds the sacred sites. Songline manifesting itself in sound. Humming is comforting, steady, like the flow of a slow, deep river hidden beneath the dry surface head guides. Your steps, your focus, your state of mind walk toward the stone country. The land begins to change. Soft sand gives way to harder, compacted earth interspersed with pebbles and small rocks. Colors deepen reds, browns, purples etched into the surface of this is the memory of the continent. Revealed or walking into an area of deep significance while slows his pace even further, profound. Deference to the ground we tread would pass a large solitary Buddha it stands. Alone, ancient and immense. A dark sentinel's surface is smooth worn by untold ages of wind and sand. Wallu stops briefly, placing his hand on the cool, stony, silent communion. A quiet recognition he is absorbing the story held within the rock, the memories etched, there by time and spirit to stand. Beside him, feeling the massive presence of the Buddha, hums with an inner energy, an ancient resonance who are intruders, but Welcomed visitors moving with respect across a landscape that holds the dreaming. Path leads us around the base of the boulder and then upward gently. The ascent is gradual, slow, careful placement of feet on uneven. Stone Earth view opens up behind. The U.S. showing the vastness of the plains we have crossed. A flat reddish expanse stretching back to the misty horizon reinforces. The deep distance we have traveled and the immensity of the land sun is now high, directly overhead, eliminating the shadows pause as the heat becomes insistent, seeking the thin shade of an overhanger. Small recess carved naturally into the rock face height provides a welcome pocket of cool air. A brief respite from the relentless sun wallow prepares a drink from thee. Water carried in the cool skin bag tastes earthy, refreshing, deeply necessary. Gestures to a series of markings on the stone wall of the recessing ochre paintings. Images of animals, of human. Figures of geometric patterns they are faded old. Barely visible evidence of countless generations who have sheltered her. They are not decorations. They are records, maps, stories, history etched. Deeply into the stone, not with tools, but with intention and spirit, we sit in silence for a long while. Letting the quiet seep into U.S. breathing the cool air, resting the feet, allowing the body to settle. Journey is always slow. The learning is always deep. We are not rushing toward a destination. We are moving through the story, each step revealing. Another line, another verse, another of the song break is essential, a moment of hushed contemplation before the next stage one. We rise, the sun has passed its highest point. Shadows begin to reappear, thin slivers stretching east, the heat remains. But the most intense pressure has eased while you leads us out of the shelter, back into the warm light landscape. Now is more rugged, more deeply carved. We're entering the high stone country where the earth reveals. Its bones walking becomes a little more challenging, requiring focus and care stepping over loose stones. Finding the firm footing, it demands concentration, but the slow pace prevents fatigue with. Sound of our feet changes from the soft shuffle of sand to the clicking and crunching of rock, a rhythmic percussive sound now accompanying Walu's low humming. Journey continues forward toward the deepest heart of the ancient land of Re. Movement slow, every breath deep. Every sight a story waiting to unfold. Walk on steadily, quietly. Following the flow of the ancestral river of light, the path stretches out before us, slow, certain eternal. The blue sky, the guiding light of the dreaming, leading us further into the sleep of the great walkabout. Cooling air slid down. The slope of the ancient Dunit was a hushed breath across the hot red. Dust sun had long sunk beyond the far ridge living. Only a deep wash of amber light spreading thin across the wide plain where they now rested. Warmth held fiercely. By the massive stone was slowly surrendering its heat to the approaching night of velvet darkness that crept from the east, bringing with it a silence so profound it felt like the entire world was holding its own deep breath. Muru watched the elder Nura tending the tiny fire, a sacred slow combustion that required only the finest kindling tree twigs snapped softly, yielding their light. A small yellow heartbeat in the vast growing gloom. Nura's face, etched by sun and wisdom, was illuminated by the low flickering flame, was cloaked in the shadows of the setting Tima. Figure perfectly merged with the ancient landscape. This place was the resting bowl of the great ancestral. Deep concave depression between two towering mesa walls. The sand here was smooth and fine, color of bleached bone, mixed with iron oxide red. It was the place where the spirit dingo sometimes slept, leaving it silent. Memory pressed into the earth. Muru settled his cloak of woven plant fibers around his shoulders. Drop was dramatic, swift, and certain. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the land. The only sound now was the gentle crackling of the small fire and the slow, steady breathing of Nura. The air smelled of eucalypt smoke and dry earth scent. Of enduring timelessness, Nura spoke, his voice. A low rhythmic rumble did not break the silence, but became a thread woven into the hush. We rest here, where the first ochre was found, Muru said, slowly tracing a line in the sand where the crooked finger. This is the place of the gathering of colors long before the rain clouds knew where to find their way hometh. Ancestors found the red rock hair deep in the cliff, face hidden from the burning sun. They chipped it slowly, patting light paint the stories, the pathways, the warnings. The songline is etched into the earth and the stone, but its meaning is held in the colors we use. Red is the blood of the land, the life the sun's fierce power white is the spirit, the sky, the cleansing water yellow. Is the honey the warmth, the rising light black? Is the deepest night the shadows, the hidden pools? Nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Each syllable was weighted with historia. History so long it stretched beyond the reach of human thought, Nura pointed. With his chin toward the towering cliff wall behind them, is cloaked in shadow, no, but beneath the overhang is the gallery. Place where the old ones painted the movement, the walkabout, is the movement it, is the following of the tracks of the great buyings, but the tracks are not always visible to the eye, or felt in the heat of the ground, are remembered in the shape of the mountain peak, are sung into the wind as it passes through the gorge night. We look not only at the paintings, but at the manner in which they were meditative, deep, slow work that takes 1,000 years to complete a own layer of story, painted over another layer of story. 1,000 years of sleep and waking recorded on the velvet stone. Nura rose slowly with the grace of the desert. Heranen beckoned Muru to follow him away from the firelight. They moved silently across the cool sand there. Footfalls muffled, gentle, almost non-existent. The cliff face loomed massive and dark, its ancient stone surface rough beneath Muru's fingertips. He felt the vibrations of immense geological weight that pressed down on all time. They ducked beneath a low slab of rock and terrain, a narrow, shallow cave or sheltering. Nora ignited a small torch made of resinous wood. The light sprang forth, immediate and warm, chasing the shadows into the deeper corners. Walls inside were alive. Muru felt a profound reverence wash over him. Sealing the back wall, every available flat surface was covered in figures drawn in thick ochre pigments. These were not simply drawings, they were records of existence. They were the dream time made physically manifest. There were figures of massive kangaroos leaping across. Time-theory muscles defined their movement, captured perfectly. They were ancestral spirits. Tall, slender, cloaked in ceremony, wearing elaborate headdresses of feathers and bone. And everywhere, the signs of the water, cycles, swirling clouds, but heavy droplets, serpentine lines. Representing the rivers that only flowed sometime as the hidden water holes that were the key to survival. Nora pointed to one depiction. High above their heads, a massive figure of the emu spirit. The emu spirit is the maker of the night sky's darkness. Said softly, he is etched into the velvet dome above us, where his movements create the great dark patches, spaces between the selves, themselves, the rivers of light. The emu spirit here on this wall shows us the path to the seasonal lake. It is a lake of forgetting and remembering. Muru. It fills only when the wet season is truly fierce, perhaps once in 10 sun cycles or sometimes 30. It is a place of great bounty when it holds water, but it is also a great temptation for the unwary might travel toward it hoping for water that is not there. The songline holds the key to the emu's path. Nora explained, his voice dropping to a whisper. The emu walks one way when the land is scorched. He walks the other way when the thunder speaks. Look at the posture of the emu spirit here. The head is low, the body is angled sharply to the south. This tells us that the ground is dry, now that we must not rely on the large seasonal pools, but on the small deep ones, the ones that refuse to give up their moisture ebb tiny rock holes. Their stubborn and ancient Muru stared at the painted emu, spirituing to read the centuries of intent poured into the design. It was not merely art, it was a living hydrological mappa complex instruction manual. Etched onto the stone, this knowledge was precious, sacred, irreplaceable. Was the knowledge that allowed the people to endure when every other living thing might perish in the great heat. Nura moved his hand across the rough stone wall. His touch was delicate. Reverent, he stopped at a place where the painting was impossibly old-faded beneath layers of newer designs. Look closely, Muru. Here's the first story of this place. It is the story of the great heat when the sun was so relentless that the air itself seemed to turn to stone. The ancestor spirit known as Waranku, the fireman, walked across this land, and everywhere his foot touched the ground, stone became hot enough to boil the air. The people were desperate, thirsty, dying. They cried out to the earth mother for succor. Nura extinguished the small resin torch plugging the shelter back into near total darkness, and the soft spill of the distant fire providing a faint orange glow. He sat down on the dusty floor of the cave, and Muru sat beside him. The darkness intensified the other senses. Muru could feel the immense thickness of the rock above them, the steady temperature within the cavea, cool relief from the external cold. The story of the great heat must be told in darkness, Nura began, his voice slow, deliberate, hypnotic echoes. The heat of that time was so bright, it blinded the ice warren. Ku, the fireman, was relentless. He sought only to purge the world cleanse it of everything that moved quickly. He moved with the slowness of the tectonic. Totiza, grinding unbearable presence. For 100 seasons, the people survived by hiding in caves beneath the ground near the great aquifers. The water was not fresh. It was salty. It was bitter, but it was wet, and it kept the soul connected to the body. The people needed help. They needed something that moved faster than Ku. He called upon the spirit of the cool wind, the invisible one who lives high on the ridges. The cool wind spirit was nervous. He feared the fireman's immense power, but the cries of the people were strong. It rose through the earth like hot air escaping a fisherman. The cool wind heard the desperation. The cool wind descended slowly, a great spiral that moved with incredible deliberation. It was so slow it felt like stillness itself, but it was movement absolute, unstoppable. When the cool wind reached the ground, it did not extinguish the fire immediately. It began to whisper to the stone. It spoke of the joy of shadow. It spoke of the peace of moisture. It spoke of the necessity of rest. The stone, which had absorbed the fireman's anger, began to listen to the cool wind's soft suggestions. The surface of the rock cooled first, just a thin skin of relief, a velvet layer of coolness. The fireman, Ku, felt this slight change and he became enraged. He stamped his foot upon the stone tree to force the heat back to the surface, but the cool wind was patient. It continued its spiraling descent, pushing the heat down, deep into the earth's core. It belonged a slow, eternal flame. The battle was long. Near it was so long that generations were born and died within the shelter wall. The sound of the grinding heat and the whispering cool wind fought outside on the plains. Eventually, Ku grew tired. The power of the cool wind was not brute force, it was persistence, it was slowness, it was the eternal soothing. Murmur, Warrenuk decided to rest for one brief momenta, fatal Aaron. That moment of stillness, cool wind rushed in it, pulled all the remaining heat from the surface of the land and trapped it deep within the stone sealing the ground with a thin cold crust, and where the cool wind rested finally in deep light cried tears of exhaustion. These tears were pure water, first fresh water the people had seen in 100 seasons, and where these tears fell, ancient rivers began to trace their courses, the small rock holes, the deep secret wells where the places where the cool wind's tears settled permanently. They were etched into the landscape gifts of the spirit who moved slowly but never stopped. Nura paused. The darkness was absolute now. Only orientation was his voice. Muro felt the depth of the earth beneath him, massive weight of the history they shared. The walkabout is not just walking near it, is the slow remembering of the battle between the heat and the cool. Follow the memory of the tears. Seek the places where the cool wind stopped to rest. These places are always hidden, cloaked by the scrub, by the falls. Sambi, the deliberate misdirection of the desert spirits. They sat in silence for a long time, allowing the story to sink deep into the Maramuru. Imagined the immense slowness of that ancient battle, grinding sound of geological time applications. Required to wait 100 seasons for relief. He breathed deeply. The air inside the cave felt heavier. Somehow imbued with the spirits of the past, Nura finally broke the quiet now. We rest, truly rest. The cool wind is still protecting this place. Silence here is not empty, it is full of the stories of survival. Tomorrow we follow the emu's path, but not the obvious tracks. Follow the angle of his neck, deep shadow beneath his wing, direction of the wind that moved him. They crawled back. Out into the open air, the fire had burned low now, a bed of gentle red embers radiating a soft, steady warmth. The night sky had opened above Thema, vast expanse of velvet blackness littered with more stars than Muru could ever comprehend. The Milky Way streamed overhead, a bright celestial river of endless light. This was the great river of souls, pathway the ancestors took when they left the physical world. It was the sky version of the earth's sun when Snora lay down on his sleeping mat, his eyes gazing upwards. Look, Muru, look at the emu spirit. The constellations are guides, but the absence of light is also a guide. See, the dark spaces between the brightness, that is the body of the emu. Spirit etched against the light, its head points directly toward the place we seek, the resting pool of the cool wind's tears. The emu is cloaked in the lack of light. It demands patience, demands observation. The answers are never in the bright process, they are in the deep shadows, hushed corners of the world. Muru felt the exhaustion of the day, the intense heat, the relentless walking, the vast mental effort. The stars swam slowly above him. He focused on the outline of the celestial immense dark shape woven into the stellar scatter. It was a feeling of profound connection. The stories etched on the stone wall, creation narrative whispered by. Near the actual living map in the sky, it was all one single continuous thread of awareness. He thought about the slowness of the spirits, slowness of the walkabout itself. It was not about reaching a destination quickly, it was about inhabiting every footstep. It was about letting the deep past settle into the present moment, coming one with the slow, enduring nature of the land. He felt the amber glow of the dying fire on his skin, the coolness of the desert sand underneath his body. The air was still utterly still. A true hush had descended. Ancient country was sleeping now, and Muru was sleeping with it rocked gently by the rhythm of the timeless. Stories end. The slow, endless turn of the velvet sky above the emu spirit watched over Hema. Shadow guide across the river of stars, protecting the deep sleep that would bring the strength for the hidden path that awaited them with the return of the sun. The land breathed slow. Loru's own breath matched the rhythm of the vast sleeping desert. A harmonious, deep, steady pull of air and release of shadow. He drifted now, following the invisible tracks of the cool wind, finding his own personal hidden pool of rest deep within the silence of the ancient dreaming. Night wrapped around him, heavy and soft, a perfectly fitted cloak of darkness and history. Slow. Deep breath. In slow. Deep breath out, following the path of the hushed ancestral memory beneath. The endless stone-etched sky moving slowly into the deepest of the long slow. Sleep until the next morning, the next step, the next story arrived. With the light, the shadows grew long, thin, skeletal fingers reaching across the flat red earth as the sun bled its last slow colors onto the western rim. They felt the drop in temperature. Immediately, a relief like slipping into cool water after days of searing heat. The air was suddenly hushed heavy with the scent of dry gum leaves and cooling iron. Or they moved with that deep economy of motion known only to those who walk the earth as their home. Not just a destination, but dust that had coated their skin and hair all day began to feel like a fine powder lifting gently. Away with the rising evening breeze, and the sound of their feet on the hard pan changed from a crunching scrape to a softer, more muffled tread. A sign they were nearing the sanctuary they sought. The waterhole known as Miriwanga lay nestled deep within a fold of sandstone where the ground sloped down, gradually inviting them into its protected space. And the eldest, Corrali, led the way, his pace steady, unwavering, his eyes fixed on the deepening purple of the horizon where the permanent spring lay hidden. He knew the way not by sight alone, but by the feeling in his knees, the shift in the soil under his worn leather solace, the subtle whisper of the trees that only grew near constant moisture. A silent ancient welcome. This portion of the journey, the slow sinking into evening, was the most sacred time, when the energies of the land settled and the noise of the day surrendered to a great and profound stillness that hushed the soul. The sky above them was turning a deep inky blue. The color of old velvet, and the first pinpricks of light began to appear, faint, distant promises that soon would flare into the blazing glory of the Southern Cross. They reached the crest of the final rise, a low curving ridge of red rock, polished smooth by eons of wind and rain, and below them stretched the basin of Miriwanga, silent, mysterious, perfectly still. Water was a disk of liquid black, reflecting the nascent stars. The rock surrounding it was dark stone, smooth and cool to the touch, etched deeply with the markings of their dreaming ancestors who had rested here before time was counted. They descended slowly, carefully picking their way down the steep slope. Each foot placement deliberate, a conscious act of respect for the resting place of the great creator's snake, the one who carved the riverbeds with its massive movement. A profound sense of peace washed over the small group, dispelling the weariness and the ache in their muscles. The journey had been long, hard, relentless, but this arrival felt like the closing of a perfect circle, A necessary return, Corelli knelt. First, beside the water, dipping his cupped hands into the cool, sweet fluid. He drank slowly, deeply, savoring the taste of the earth's purity. The essence of the life that persisted against all odds. The water held the memory of every rain, every drought, every life sustained by its cool, unwavering presence in drinking it. It was not just quenching thirst, it was absorbing the history, the power of the ancient. Knowledge held within the very structure of the molecules. The air here was different, rich with the perfume of damp soil and the flowering native mint that grew thick around the edges of the pool, a soft aromatic cloak surrounding the weary travelers. They set their meager packs down onto the soft sand near the water's edge. The sand here was pale, almost white, contrasting sharply with the deep red rock formations above it. Felt silky cool under their hands, and it promised a truly restful sleep. Young Yari immediately began collecting firewood, small, dead branches of mulga, and dry spinifex grass that crackled with stored heat even before the match touched them. His movements were fluid, silent, practiced a ballet of survival. He laid the fire slowly, deliberately building a small sheltered nest for the flame, understanding that the fire was not just for warmth or cooking, but a companion. A watchful eye against the vast, intimidating darkness. When the flame finally caught it was a gentle licking thing, a soft, bright amber pulse against the growing night, illuminating the smooth stone faces. Nearby, the light danced, creating long, shifting shadows that seemed to whisper stories of the past. Corelli sat back, leaning against a massive boulder that was almost warm, having absorbed the day's sunlight. It was an ancient stone worn into a smooth seat, perfectly fitted to a human form, suggesting that many generations had rested in this exact spot. He closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of the night beginning to stir, the gentle rustle of a kangaroo moving through the bush, the distant sigh of the wind moving over the higher plateau, the constant low chirp of unseen insects. The sound of the fire was comforting, a soft hiss and pop, a counterpoint to the absolute silence of the desert night, and the light from the embers cast a warm, deep glow on their faces, softening the lines of fatigue and worry. This was the rhythm they chased, the rhythm of the walk, the rhythm of the earth, the constant cycle of exertion and profound rest. And here at Miriwanga, the rhythm was slow. Steady hypnotic tree brought Corelli a small skin of water and sat beside him, looking up at the now brilliant sky. The stars were overwhelming, impossibly numerous and close. They seemed to spill across the dark velvet canopy like scattered diamond dust. Each star was a story, each constellation a map, a songline traced across the heavens, mirroring the paths they walked below. And Corelli pointed a slow, deliberate finger toward a cluster of 3 bright stars. That one, he murmured, his voice low, almost a breath. That is the emu in the sky. The great shadow stretching across the Milky Way. You see the dark patch, not the stars themselves. That is the bird chasing the eggs. The meaning of all things is held in what is invisible. Jari Jari gazed up, his young mind absorbing the weight of the tradition, the complexity of the ancient knowledge that made sense of the bewildering vastness of the Australian interior. The emu in the sky was not just a story. It was a moral compass, a calendar, a guide to the seasons of hunting and harvest. And to understand the emu was to understand the balance of life, the deep sense of immersion, the feeling of being cloaked completely in the landscape. And the ancestral narrative was palpable here at the waterhole. They were not just camping, they were participating in the dreaming. The smell of smoke mixed with the cool dampness of the spring water was deeply relaxing, a kind of natural incense that calmed the nerves and settled the heart. And the quiet lapping of the water against the etched stone bank was a steady metronome, a lullaby from the earth itself. Corelli felt the tension draining from his shoulders, the weight of responsibility easing slightly here, where the connection was strongest, where the ancestors felt closest. He remembered his own initiation walkabout many years ago, the fear, the exhilaration, the absolute isolation that forced him to confront his own spirit and find the strength that lay hidden deep within. He had rested at this same waterhole, then a frightened boy becoming a man, and the memory was like a warm blanket reassurance that the tradition was resilient, unbreakable. The fire crackled softly, sending up sparks that dissolved instantly into the immense darkness above. and the amber light glowed steadily, holding the small circle of travelers. Safe within its warmth, they ate simple food, dried meats, and prepared roots. Cooked briefly over the coals, the taste simple, pure, sustaining, and the silence during the meal was profound, a testament to their exhaustion and their contentment. There was no need for talk. The presence of the water, the fire, the vast sky spoke volumes, filling the space with meaning and peace, and the cool night air began to wrap around them, a gentle pressure, a final soothing touch. When the food was finished, Yari carefully banked the fire, ensuring that the embers would hold their heat. Throughout the long night, the stones around the perimeter of the fire pit were now pleasantly warm, radiating a gentle heat into the sand. Corelli instructed them to lie down facing the water, where the moonlight would soon touch the surface, turning the black mirror into shimmering silver. He reminded them that the water was sacred, that their thoughts must be quiet, respectful, focused on the healing properties of the resting place. And they settled down, pulling their thin animal hides over their bodies. The ground was cool and firm beneath the hides, a perfect support for their tired bones, and the subtle scent of the earth rose up, embracing them, welcoming them back into the deep sleep of the desert. Corelli watched until the breathing of the younger men became slow and rhythmic, synchronized with the steady, soft hiss of the banked fire, and the ancient stone surrounding the pool seemed to hum a low frequency vibration of deep rest. He remained awake for a little longer, his consciousness hovering between the physical world and the dreaming, gazing at the stars, which were now so bright they cast faint shadows on the ground. He felt the presence of the ancestors all around him, their spirits mingling with the cool night air, guarding the waterhole, guarding their sleep, guarding this sacred journey that still lay ahead. The walkabout was a pilgrimage, not just of distance, but of time. A journey back into the origins of their people, and the deeper they traveled, the more ancient the land felt, the more they shed the layers of the immediate and merged with the infinite. Sleep now beckoned a soft, insistent promise. A doorway into the world of dreams, where the real lessons of the walkabout truly began, where the stories etched into the stone and the stars would be sung directly into their spirits. He closed his eyes, finally, the vast silence overwhelming and comforting. And the final thought that drifted through his mind was the cool weight of the ancient stone beneath his hand, a tether to the earth, a deep, undeniable assurance of safety and home. The air was still hushed, velvet, soft, amber embers, holding vigil against the deep black of the desert night, and the slow, cool peace of Mirawanga waterhole settled over them all, a deep, profound, and healing sleep. Water stretched out before them, vast and velvet under the descending amber light. It was the heart of the dry season, yet this billabong, this sacred water eye of the land, remained deep and breathing. Kurina paused, his gaze sinking into the dark, reflective surface, knowing every ripple, every hidden log, every fish that swam there. Dust of their long journey settled, finally lifted away by the hushed air that rose cool and moist from the water's edge. Maliki, the young walker, stood beside him, motionless, absorbing the enormity of the space they had entered. This was the crossing spoken of in the whispered lines of the ancestors, a boundary place where the spirits of the deep earth met the spirits of the flowing water. Karana crouched down, his movements slow, deliberate, respectful. Took a handful of the wet black mud, rich with the decay of millennia, and rubbed it gently across his chest, a smudge of welcome, a declaration of Pia. The mud smelled of life and time, and the deep sleep of the ancestors murmured words too ancient for translation. Simple sounds that carried the weight of the dreaming, naming the fish, naming the rushes, naming the hidden guardian snake of this place. Maliki watched, learning the necessity of protocol, the absolute requirement of permission. Before taking rest or water, the golden sun bled into the horizon, turning the water a deep blood red, then fading rapidly into bruised violet. Air chilled, suddenly a shift that announced the coming of the night. They moved back slightly, choosing a small rise. Shielded by the paper bark trees, their white bark peeled and fluttered like ghosts in the dying light. No fire, yet only the sound of their breath and the soft lapping of the water against the clay banks. Karana took his Coleman, the traditional carrying bowl, and dipped it carefully, pulling up the cool, clear liquid. Did not drink first. He spilled a small, offering back onto the ground for the spirits of the water, a tribute of respect, a quiet thank you for the life they were about to receive. And Then did he lift the bowl to his lips, drinking slowly, deeply, letting the water settle the dust in his throat. Maliki followed the elder's lead, replicating emotions. Precisely, the co-element dipped the water, offered the slow swallow. He ate dried meat and pounded seeds. Silently, the focus was not on the food, but on the stillness of the environment. This was a place of power, a place where the veil between the waking world and the dreaming was incredibly thin one. The last hint of light was gone. The sky became a vast sheet of black. Velvet stars exploded into existence, not pinpricks, but shimmering diamonds suspended just above their heads. Garena pointed up, tracing an invisible line through the clustered light of the Milky. With it is the great river, he whispered, the one the ancestors followed when they first woke the world. River we walk is merely a reflection of that sky channel. Maliki tilted his head back, letting the infinity wash over him. Southern Cross, the famous crux, hung low and clear, an etched diamond in the South. Garena spoke now, the emu in the sky, not the bright stars, but the dark spaces between them, the absence of light that formed the shape of the celestial bird. It is the darkness that tells the story. He explained softly, the emptiness that holds the shape of the spirit emu is drinking tonight from the river of light, preparing for the next season. This understanding, this profound knowledge that the shadows were as important as the light, was the core of the Songlines. They were walking through a landscape, not of rocks and soil, but of stories. And shadows, they laid their simple sleeping knots down on the warm sand, protected by the whispering pepper bars. Garena covered himself with his worn kangaroo cloak, fur side in for warmth, did not sleep immediately. He watched, listened to the soft hoot of an owl, the distant mournful cry of a dingo, the constant hum of insects near the water. These were not just noises, they were the language of the night, speaking of safety or danger of movement or rest. He taught Maliki to read the subtle changes in the darkness, where the moon cast shadows that moved like creeping things. Way the air felt different just before dawn. West listened with the bone, he murmured, referring to the deepest of the self. Not just the ear must feel the earth breathing beneath you, as after a time the elder's breathing deepened into the slow, steady rhythm of sleep. Maliki lay awake for hours, his young mind absorbing the weight of the ancient place. Felt cloaked by history, wrapped in the deep knowledge held by the land itself. Journey was no longer just a walk, it was an immersion, thought back to the rock shelter they had passed days ago. The immense overhang of ancient red stone, etched with figures, kangaroo, the hunter, the hands pressed into the soft ochre. 1,000 generations marking their passing. Those hands spoke of continuity, of the unbroken chain of being. Understood now why the walkabout was necessary. It was not about reaching a destination, it was about renewing the link. It was about proving to the ancestors that the story still lived, that the songline was still sung. When he finally drifted into sleep, his dreams were filled with water and stars. Saw the emu drinking the immense celestial darkness pouring into the earth. Bella woke before the sun, a deep instinct pulling him from sleep. Garena was already stirring banked fire coals, glowing low beneath a tripod of sticks. Morning air was intensely cold, biting and clean. He moved slowly, deliberately shaking off the deep slumber. Garena gathered small, dry sticks and fed them gently to the fire, coaxing a plume of thin, white smoke that rose straight up into the absolute stillness of the dawn. First light began to touch the eastern sky, not yet the sun, but the promise of it. A pale gray-pink luminescency warmed themselves by the fire, preparing for the next stage, which Garena had warned would be difficulty. We're leaving the shelter of the Billabong and moving into a vast plain of wrecks and sharpstone country. Bear moving, they performed the morning rituals. Garena took up a stone, an ancient grinding stone carried by their people for countless years, began to prepare the ochre needed for their bodies and their implement. This ochre was unique to this region, a deep burnt orange color, highly preserved. Mixed the powdered pigment with a small amount of fat, rubbing the mixture between his palms until it was smooth and oily. Applied the ochre first to himself, marking specific lines on his forearms and across his forehead. These markings were symbols of protection, of identity, of connection to the local spirit sphere. Told the story of who he was and where he had traveled, and he marked Maliki, teaching him this specific pattern for this clan's passage through the Central Plains. cool, slick ochre felt. Like a shield, like a connection being physically etched onto his skin it grounded. Him reminding him that he was visible to the ancient eyes watching from the landscape there. Tools, their spears, their throwing sticks were also marked renewed with the pigment. Fire crackled softly, casting deep shadows that danced on the pepperbark corona, took up a small, curved piece of wood, a sound maker used for specific ceremonies. Began to tap it lightly against the stone, the rhythm slow, deep, mesmerizing this. Tapping was an acoustic map of the songline, the rhythm mimicking the steps of the ancestors. It was a call to the land announcing their intention to travel peacefully. To respect the boundaries, Maliki sat completely, still allowing the deep penetrating sound to resonate within him. It was hypnotic preparation. Not just physical, but spiritual. Sun finally broke the horizon, a sudden blinding explosion of golden light turning the water from gray to sparkling silver. They packed their remaining supplies efficiently, leaving no trace of their presence save the cooled ashes of the small fire speck. Required that the land look untouched, pristine, as if they had only passed through a dream before they stepped away from the water. Corona scooped up a small handful of earth and scattered it over the billabong's edge. Farewell. To the water spirits, he whispered, we travel safely guided by your strength. Turned their backs on the oasis and faced the immense open stretch of country. Ahead, the spinifex grass stretched out like endless waves of green and gold, sharp, needled and tough. Ground was rock hard. Cracked clay and scattered quartz stones that reflected the sunlight with blinding intensity. This was the country of the swift mover of the enduring spirit. Heat began to climb almost instantly, a dry baking heat that stole the moisture from the earth. He walked slowly but steadily there, strides long practiced in economical coral led, setting a pace that could be maintained for hours under the harsh sun. Taught Maliki how to read the slight depressions in the ground where hidden water might still linger deep beneath the surface. How to spot the subtle tracks of the kangaroo or the emu, which provided not only food but direction. Silence of the plain was overwhelming, broken only by the crunch of their feet on the baked earth, and the occasional buzz of a blowflight was a sound that spoke of infinite emptiness, of immense distancity. We're following a narrow ridge line of ancient stone. Cloaked in a reddish dust, Korana explained that this ridge was the backbone of a great ancestor, a serpent that had crawled through the land during the beginning times, carving the channels and lifting the mountains. The very footstep they took was upon the body of a sacred. By this knowledge made the walk not a burden, but a profound act of worship. He stopped for a brief rest beneath the meager shade of a mulga tree, its leaves thin and gray, providing little relief but necessary cover. Korana pulled out his digging stick and began testing the ground nearby, was searching for the root of a specific desert. A crucial source of both water and sustenance. Knowledge of where these treasures lay hidden was etched onto his very soul, passed down through countless generations. Dug patiently, slowly, carefully, preserving the integrity of the soil around the small plant. He was targeting movement, was rhythmic, almost meditative. Maliki watched the absolute economy of the elder's effort. No wasted energy, just focused persistence. This root finally emerged, a white, slender tuber, deeply buried, a gift from the thirsty earthy. Shared the yam, chewing the crisp, moist flesh, savoring the natural sweetness. This small act of finding life in the seeming barrenness was a powerful lesson in survival and gratitude. Walked on into the peak heat of the day, the air shimmering and distorting the distant view, making the horizon ripple like water. Korana spoke quietly of the dangers of misjudgment in this country, off the deceptive mirages of the sudden dust devils that sprang up without warning. Pointed out a specific clump of small, low-growing bushes that marked the place where the traveler had once been lost centuries. Ago's story of the lost one was now embedded in the songline, a caution, a lesson, a marker. Narrative of the land was a continuous history lesson, a warning and a guidance. The afternoon wore on the harsh glare, softened slightly, yielding to a beautiful hazy light. They began to see signs that they were approaching another area of settlement. Note: permanent housing, but meeting grounds established centuries ago, used during ceremonial gatherings. Here were small carved markings on the scattered granite boulders, faint lines showing stylized representations of shields and hunting garwast. Move with even greater care. Now Korana instructed, his voice low, are entering the territory of cousins, but we must announce our presence. Respectful of strict protocols of meeting extended family who live vast distances apart required absolute. Adherency moved off the main ridge line onto softer ground, approaching a dried riverbed, which offered a smoother path. Maliki felt a sense of excitement, mixed with apprehension. Walkabout was nearing the stage where his spiritual education would be put to the test. They would need to participate in the greetings, in the exchange of knowledge, in the sharing of songs. Korana stopped abruptly, holding up a hand, knelt, and pointed to a faint track pressed into the sand of the riverbed. Track of a barefoot fresh within the last hour or two. A small group is traveling ahead of us, he said. We will follow their path, but we will keep our distance until we reach the meeting place. Taught Maliki how to read the subtle signs of the traveler's intense depth of the heel print. The positioning of the toes, the absence of dragging marks suggested. They were carrying light burdens and moving purposefully. They moved forward stealthily, cloaked by the deepening shadows of the late afternoon. The dried river wound through gentle hills, the landscape becoming slightly less hostile. Heard it, then the distant sound of voices, low, chanting, rhythmic. It was the sound of a gathering in progress. A deep low hum that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Korana smiled, a rare, slow widening of his lips. Are singing the gathering songs, he said. This is where the songline truly begins to merge with the lives of the people who are almost there. Young one, we are almost at the place. Of the elders, they found a sheltered spot on a bank overlooking a wide, shallow depression where the chanting was emanating. They stopped to wait until the setting sun would grant them the proper time for approach. Air was thick with the scent of smoke and a cooking meat. A rich, aromatic promise of rest and company. Felt the deep exhaustion of the journey finally pressing down on him, but mixed with the weariness was a profound sense of accomplishment. Had walked the silent paths. He had learned the hidden names. He had felt the pulse of the ancient land. Sat beside Korana, gazing at the last moments of the sun, which painted the scene in hues of deep amber and fiery orange. Korana began to softly sing a welcoming chant of his own, a counterpoint to the distant voices. It was a song of safe passage, of shared lineage, of the eternal return. Sun sank below the rim of the earth. The stars began their slow, majestic reveal. Time for approach had come. Korana stood tall, casting a long shadow in the twilight, adjusted his cloak, touched the ochre markings on his face. We go now, Maliki. He said to speak the words of the journey, to share the strength of the walkabout. They descended the bank, moving towards the sound. The velvet night swallowing their forms. Chanting grew louder, clearer, more insistent. Maliki knew that the next few hours would be filled with ceremony, with the recounting of all they had seen and learned. Since leaving their home country was no longer just the boy who left, he was the traveler who returned with knowledge. Was the connection renewed, the future preserved. Smoke hung low and sweet over the gathering site, the fires burning bright small beacons in the vast darkness. Stepped out into the light of the central fire, the chanting immediately ceasing, a profound silence falling upon the assembled group. Eyes of the elders fixed upon him, waiting for the first word of greeting. Maliki stood slightly behind Korana, cloaked in the shadow, but fully present, ready to witness the culmination of their immense journey through the ancient tracks of the dreaming. The obsidian dust still clung to his leather coat, the air thick with the scent of dried moss and deep earth. Ancient secrets held in the limestone walls he had broken through to reach this inner space. Chamber was hushed, unnervingly quiet, the only sound the slow drip of water from a distant unlit seam far above his head. He raised the lamp, the soft amber glow, catching the facets of the carved stone. An intricate repeating pattern etched not by tools of iron, but by time itself. This was the heart of the cloaked city, not the surface ruins he had first explored, but the submerged kernel, the place where the builders retreated when the sky turned against them. He knelt before the central pillar, massive and perfectly cylindrical, its surface covered in glyphs that resembled frozen starlight. They were not letters as he knew them. They were celestial coordinates, maps of a universe already lost before the memory of the pyramids was conceived. The stone felt strangely warm beneath his fingertips, a velvet heat that belied its age. Remembered the inscription on the outer vault, the prophecy. Of the Sleeper King, a ruler who did not die but simply waited cloaked in the geometry of his own fortress. The lamplight dance creating elongated shadows that stretched and shrank along the concave ceiling, suggesting a dome that housed not air, but pressure, a hidden energy. He traced the outline of a particularly complex glyph, a spiral nebula that seemed to rotate under the very touch of his skin as his finger followed the line. A low hum began, a vibration that started deep within the stone. Of the pillar traveling up his arm, settling in his chest, it was not a mechanical sound, not the grind of gears, but the resonance of something vast and heavy, moving slowly, shifting its weight after millennia of stillness. The amber light intensified, briefly blinding him, forcing him to close his eyes. When he opened them, the chamber had not changed, but the atmosphere had shifted subtly. The hushed silence now felt pressurized, expectant. He realized the pillar was not just a monument, it was a device. A clock driven not by gravity, but by the orbital cycle of a long dead star. Stepped back, watching as the light coalesced at the base of the pillar, forming a small liquid pool of golden light. Within this pool, the history of the Sleeper King unfolded. Not in pictures, but in pure sensation, a wash of cold ambition and profound loneliness. He felt the weight of the ancient decision. The choice to seal away not treasure but knowledge, the certainty that their civilization could not survive. The light. Above, they went down into the dark, seeking the velvet safety of the deep ground, the stone becoming their blanket, their final archive. Soft click echoed through the chamber, a sound of perfect precision, nothing brittle or rushed. Of the pillar slowly, smoothly retreated, revealing a niche. Within the niche rested a single object, small and dense, dark, like cooled volcanic glass. He reached out his hand, hesitated, then drew the object out. It was warm to the touch, surprisingly lightweight, given its apparent density. It was smooth, perfectly polished, a miniature black sphere, etched with a single line running around its equator, an uneven, crooked line. Like a path walked in shadow, this was the key, the focus point, the very thing the maps had pointed toward. He held it up to the lamplight, examining its surface. It absorbed the amber glow immediately, leaving only a faint inner luminescence, a coal that refused to burn out. As he studied the sphere, he felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if this object belonged not to the ancient king, but to himself, to a memory he had suppressed or inherited. Air grew heavy with the smell of brine salt water drawn from deep subterranean seas. Looked down and saw that the pool of golden light had begun to expand, creeping outward from the pillar, across the floor, toward the entrance he had used. This light was not simply illumination, it was liquid calculation. A slow-moving wave of mathematics. He had activated the mechanism, and now the fortress was reorienting itself, preparing for something new. He had expected perhaps a hidden chest or a scroll containing the final words of the lost people, but this sphere was purely functional, purely navigational. He understood suddenly that glyphs were not history, they were instructions. The Sleeper King was not waiting for an awakening, he was waiting for a signal, and by removing the sphere, the key, Elias had just provided that signal. A second sound followed the slow-moving light, a deeper, more resonant thrumming coming from beneath the flagstones. He stood upon it. Was the sound of colossal weight being displaced, the grinding shift of miles of stone. Moving slowly, inexorably, he had assumed this chamber was the lowest point, the end of the line. He was wrong. The chamber was simply the antechamber, the point of preparation. He looked around desperately for an exit, the original entrance now bathed in the expanding gold light, which seemed to forbid passage. The light was not hostile, but purely assertive, declaring its domain. He pressed the sphere against the wall opposite the pillar, hoping for a secondary release, a quick escape route. Nothing. He turned back to the pillar, the light on the floor now reflecting off the black sphere in his hand. The crooked line etched on the sphere suddenly seemed to glow faintly silver white, a faint path guiding his eye. Looked closer at the line, realizing it was not a crack or a defect. It was a river system, a stylized representation of water flowing through the hidden depths of the earth, and this river system pointed directly down beneath the floor, beneath his boots. He felt a sinking realization, the true archive, the place of a Sleeper King, was far deeper than this chamber. He gripped the sphere tight, his breath slow and shallow, trying to match the rhythm of the deep earth hum. The ground beneath him vibrated slightly, the frequency increasing not violently, but patiently. Knelt down, pressing his ear to the cold stone floor. The noise was unmistakable, the vast mechanical groaning of a door, unlike any man-made structure he had ever encountered. It sounded like the roots of mountains separating reluctantly after a billion years of union. He stood up knowing he had minutes before the floor opened or shifted or locked him permanently inside. He looked at the small black sphere. The key, the only certainty in this shifting space. If this object opened the next layer of the fortress, it also served as the beacon for whatever mechanism lay below. He had to move toward the sound, not away from I. Placed the sphere back into the niche of the pillar, hoping to reverse the sequence to stop the process. The sphere did not sit correctly. It slipped, falling through the back of the niche into darkness. Thin whisper followed the fall, a sound that felt like wind passing through ancient bone. Hushed chamber responded instantly. The light on the floor vanished. The hum ceased. The profound mechanical sound from below stopped abruptly mid-groan silence. Returned absolute, complete, heavier than before, a silence that felt dangerous. Was alone. The exit sealed, the key gone, and the next level of the fortress alerted, but now dormant, waiting for its next instruction. He shone the amber lamp into the niche where the sphere had disappeared. Back of the niche was now not solid stone, but a perfectly cut dark shaft leading down into unimaginable depths. It smelled of ozone and mineral salts, a cold, clean air that promised nothing but distance. He looked into the blackness, the velvet void, and saw no bottom, only the reflection of his own lamplight, retreating endlessly down, down, down. He leaned in, listening for any residual sound, any sign that the mechanism was still moving. He heard only a slow, soft scratching sound, not the sound of water dripping or stone wearing away. Was the sound of something moving in the darkness below, something small and deliberate, clawing its way up the sheer stone shaft toward the light. He pulled back the lamp, reflecting off the smooth stone of the pillar, the glyphs seeming to mock his haste. The cloaked king did not wait only for a signal. He waited for a visitor. Now the king was stirring in the deep dark below the velvet curtain of the earth, the quiet scratching growing infinitesimally. Closer, a slow, patient ascension toward the amber glow. The sun bled out slowly, a wounded ochre stain across the endless dome of the sky. The long shadows stretched thin and brittle, reaching out from the stunted acacia. The cooling air was a balm against skin, sun-baked and dry. We paused where the earth began. Its slow incline toward the mountain that slept a giant stone beast. Hushed and waiting for the stars to settle in its velvet fold. Manjaru lowered his pack, the woven mesh basket sinking into the fine red sand. Without a sound, he did not speak. He simply looked at the immense structure before us, the ancient heart of the land, visible, palpable, overwhelming in its scale. This was the end of the long road, the place spoken of in whispers and songlines, the destination of our slow, measured walk. About the silence here was thick, a heavy blanket woven from ancient dust and timeless dreams. Only the dry scrape of the wind whispering secrets along the rock face disturbed the stillness. The wind carried the scent of dry grasses and ozone, and the deep, earthy aroma of iron ore, a metallic perfume of deep time. We had walked through the day's relentless fire, the sun hammering down upon the crown of our heads, forcing the sweat to dry instantly on the skin. Now the rapid drop in temperature was a blessing of profound relief that sank into the core of the bones. Jaru lifted his hand, a gesture older than written memory. His palm opened to the darkening sky. We sat together beneath the shadow. The deep purple cloaked in mystery. The ground beneath us still held the fierce heat of the day, radiating amber warmth up into our weary bones. The air grew cooler, now a deep chill rising from the gorges, hidden deep within the stone. Scent of eucalyptus oil, sharp and clean, cut through the dryness. A medicinal promise of rest, a deep, slow settling. The tiny night insects began their humming chorus, a faint, high-pitched buzz that provided a gentle acoustic blanket for the growing dark. It was not silence, but a low vibration of life. Insistent and endless. Jaru's voice was low, a gravelly rumble that matched the contours of the landscape. He spoke of the final convergence, the point where the ancestor spirits came home. He said the journey is almost complete, seeker, but the final steps are the most important. They must be taken not with The feet alone, but with the soul peeled back open like a soft inner bark, we had traveled for many suns, many moons following the tracks of the ancestors, the paths invisible to the eye, yet clearly defined in the heart. We had crossed salt pans and spinifex fields. We had seen the mirage shimmer on the horizon like liquid silver. We had known thirst and exhaustion and the profound joy of finding water in a hidden rock hole. This mountain was not merely rock, it was the solidified memory of creation. The skin of the dreaming made manifest, its summit was lost, now swallowed by the swift blackness of the night sky. Only the lower slopes remained visible, vast slopes of iron ore and quartz, shimmering subtly under the distant starlight. Every fissure, every groove in the ancient stone was a syllable of a forgotten language, a history etched deep into the earth's own body. Were dwarfed by its immensity, small sparks of life against the backdrop of eternity. I watched the play of shadow, and faint light across the cliff faced a slow-moving velvet curtain. Drawing across the day's stage, the shadows deepened. They consumed the orange light, leaving only deep indigo and the promise of dawn far, far away. Jaru taught me to look not just at the stone, but through it to see the history contained within the granite layers, the story of fire and water and shifting plates of the world. He pointed to a long dark seam etched vertically into the face, a sign of the great serpent's movement. In the time before time, the seam was smooth and dark, cloaked in shadow, now waiting for the moon to rise and reveal its texture. We drank the cool water from the skin pouch, sparingly, slowly, reverently, each drop a liquid blessing, each swallow a renewal of purpose. The water tasted of minerals and earth in the deep cold stored within the rock. We ate the dried meat and ground seeds, slowly chewing, deliberately taking the time to feel the nourishment sink into our tired bodies. The fatigue settled deep into the muscles, a heavy, delicious weight, a pull downward into the deepest peace, the deep, slow sleep of the land itself. The muscles in my calves protested softly, then surrendered to the earth's gravitational embrace, the weight of the day. Lifting slowly, slowly, the air smelled clean and crisp, now the last vestiges of the desert. Heat burned off, leaving only the cold purity of the evening sky. The stars began their ancient ritual, millions of tiny pinpricks of pure cold light appearing, one by one above the giant cloaked mountain. They did not rush. They simply arrived in their slow procession. A slow celestial dance, the Milky Way. Stretched above us a bright river of stardust, a trackway for the wandering spirits, the ancestors' path. Visible across the ceiling of the world, I felt myself becoming smaller, quieter, dissolving into the landscape around Minaru. Began to hum a low resonant sound deep in his chest, a sound that seemed to vibrate the very ground beneath us. It was a lullaby of the earth, a humming that recognized the sleeping giant before us and acknowledged its power, its presence, its history. The humming was rhythmic, slow, measured, drawing the breath deep into the belly and letting it go slowly, slowly. Spoke, describing the final cave, the resting place. We thought it was not a dwelling place. He stressed but a place of connection, a portal where the veil between the known world and the dreaming was thin and transparent. We would not enter until the morning when the sun's first touch purified the entrance, but tonight we would rest beneath its massive shadow, guarded by its ancient memory. Closed my eyes, and the image of the mountain remained pressed behind my eyelids, a vast dark shape etched against the residual glow of the western horizon. The redness was almost gone, now replaced by a deep violet, the color of bruise and ancient wisdom. The sand beneath my blanket was cool, yet yielding. It cradled my body, absorbing the tension, the nervousness. The relentless effort of the past weeks, I focused on Jaru's humming, the steady beat of his heart, audible in the immense silence of the desert night. The sound was an anchor holding me steady against the drift of sleep. I thought of the journey. The slow rhythm of the walking, the endless repetition of placing one foot in front of the other, the way the earth felt solid and real beneath. My bare feet connecting me to everything that had ever been, and everything that would ever be. The slow travel had forced a reorganization of time. Time was no longer a clock or a schedule, but the progression of sun and shadow. The cycle of thirst and rain, the movement of the emu and the kangaroo across the red dirt. We had shed the fast, frantic pace of the outer world. Like a snake sheds its dry skin, we moved at the speed of the land, the speed of the story. The speed of the spirit learning, patience learning, reverence learning. That slow movement is often the fastest way to reach the heart of a thing. The stars grew brighter, clearer, more intensely focused. The desert sky is unparalleled in its clarity. A vast ocean of light spilling over the mountain's shoulders. I felt the light from those distant suns traveling millions of years to reach this very spot, this small piece of cooling earth where we lay humbled and quiet. Air carried a slight dustiness, a fine red powder, disturbed by the gentle night breezes blowing from the south wind always carried old tales. Jaru had told me tales of hardship and survival, tales of the great floods and the shaping of the valley's tales etched into the land itself. My breathing deepened, matching the slow, steady rhythm of the night air. Inhale, hold, exhale. Release a meditative cycle, a slow descent into calm. The sound of my own breath was a soft whisper in the surrounding immensity. The mountain watched over us, cloaked and silent, an immense protective form. I turned my head, slightly feeling the hard surface of the earth against my cheek. The fine grains of sand shifting, slightly conforming to the shape of my skull. The coolness crept into my face, drawing away the final traces of heat from the long day we're sleeping on the dreaming track itself, on the very pathway of the ancestors' spirits. This resting place was sacred, earned by the slow effort of our travel, by the deep respect shown to the land with every single step, every deliberate choice. The stars above seemed to descend closer, almost touching the jagged peaks of the cloaked mountain. I wondered what the ancestors saw when they gazed upon this same sky. This same stretch of the river of starlight, were they watching us now, resting safely beneath their ancient rock? Were they pleased with the slowness of our approach, with the reverence of our silence, the sound of a small nocturnal creature rustling in the dry bush nearby momentarily broke the trance. Then the immense silence rushed back, and deeper, more profound than before. The creature moved quickly, then vanished, becoming of the night's great secreteer. Shifted slightly next to me, his breathing remaining deep and unwavering as steady drumbeat against the earth. I felt the bond between us strengthened by the shared hardship, by the mutual silence, by the shared appreciation for this final moment of quiet before the culmination of the walkabout, focused on the texture of the sand. The coolness spreading through my limbs, the deep, slow pull toward sleep. The final stage of the journey was approaching. It felt inevitable, and right like the sinking of the sun, the rising of the moon, the slow turning of the earth. The great stone mountain loomed above, ancient, strong, protective, casting its long shadow across the cooling plain, a sanctuary of stone, a refuge of time. The velvet darkness covered us, a gentle weight pressing us down into the safety of the earth. A hushed surrender to the deep sleep that awaited, a sleep filled with the quiet resonance of the ages, a slow sinking, slow settling, slow rest, deep rest on the ancient stone. The sun rose low and heavy, a disk of slow amber fire. Did not rush the morning here in the ancient land. It crept across the hushed desert floor, pulling the shadows long and thin behind the scattered mulga. The sand beneath the sleeping blanket was still cool, but held the deep memory of yesterday's heat, a gentle, insistent warmth that seeped into the bones. We were moving into the country of the old ones. Now the final passage of this long, slow walkabout, Elder Murrah stirred first a rustle of skin and cloth, a sound soft as falling dust. He lifted his head, cloaked in the pale morning light, and breathed in the air thick with the smell of dry eucalypt and stone. He did not speak. Speech was a wait here, where the rocks held all the necessary words etched into their surfaces by the dreaming wind. We packed the few things we carried: digging sticks, the koalamans, the fire starter, item and extension of the body and the mind, not possessions, but necessities of belonging. The path ahead was not marked by human hands, it was marked by the songline itself, a shimmering invisible thread. Only the heart could follow a melody played by the ancestral spirits. The ground began to change. The deep red ochre of the plains gave way to a rougher terrain. Slabs of gray granite rose from the earthworm, smoothed by millennia of rain and sun, like the polished backs of sleeping giants. This was the hard country, skeletal structure of the world where the rainbow serpent first dragged its immense body creating the hills and valleys and the sacred water holes, we walked slowly with reverence. Our feet learned to read the stone, finding the small indentations, the subtle rises that made the going easier, a rhythm of movement that calmed the internal restless tide. Mura stopped beside a massive boulder. It looked like a sleeping animal, its surface stained with bands of iron oxide and manganesic colors, deep and permanent. Pointed to a grouping of faint markings, images of kangaroos and hunting figures, but overlaying them was a spiral, a symbol of infinite return. This stone speaks of the first laws, he whispered. His voice was like the soft crunch of dry leaves. The law of sharing, the law of respect, the law of silence. These things are not written in easy ink, they are hammered into the stone heart of the world. You must listen with your skinless and with the blood that runs through your grandfather's veins. I sat down. On the cool velvet surface of the granite, the stone felt alive beneath me, slow pulse thrumming deep within the earth. The heat gathered around us, not oppressive yet, but patient. It shimmered above the horizon, blurring the distant shapes, turning the distant hills into soft violet mirages. I closed my eyes, letting the ancient energy wash over me. Tried to hear the stone sanyat. The winds whistled nor the hawk's crib. The deep, slow rumble of time. Mura was completely still, a statue carved. From shadow, he taught me through his stillness that the journey of the walkabout is not only about moving across space, it is about erasing the space between yourself and the past. We stayed there until the sun reached its zenith light, a blinding white curtain. The shadow beneath the boulder was our sanctuary, a cloak of cool shade protecting us. We drank sparingly from the water bag. Water tasted of the leather and earth precious beyond measure. When we moved, the day was at its peak. Shadows were sharp and small, tucked tight against the objects that cast them. We followed a dry creek beta, winding silver scar through the red earth. The rocks here were tumbled around, smoothed by floods that came perhaps once in a decade, Mura said. We follow the water even when it is not here, because the memory of water is strong. It always remembers where it should flow, and we must remember where we must follow. He pointed high up to a cleft in the stone face there. The sky fell into the rocka. Vertical crack, promising a way upward. We began the climb slow and measured. The rough rock provided perfect purchase. My hands grasped edges that had been held by generations, me ancestors' hands. Touching mine across the gulf of years, the air grew thinner, but cleaner. The view expanded behind you as a slow reveal of the world we had crossed. The vastness was humbling. A huge brown ocean stretching to every edge of sight. We reached the high ridge and paused. The wind here was constant, a gentle, sustained push. It smelled of ozone and sun-baked quartz. We looked down upon a valley bowl, pale green spinifex surrounded by red hills, and in the center of that bowl was a cluster of ghost gums, their trunks dazzling, witty, a beacon of life in the austere landscape. Mura smiled, a rare small movement of his mouth. The smile was deep and tired and satisfied. We seek the meeting place of the sky, ancestor and the earth mother, said, his voice carried away slightly by the wind. The valley below is where the first fire was. Given up fire for warmth, fire for seeing, fire of understanding. We descended into the valley. Sun began its slow decline, casting long golden fingers across the ground. The heat softened the sharp lines of the landscape, the rocks in soft amber light of time, a hushed beauty. As we reached the flat floor, the air immediately grew warmer and stiller. Wind that roared above us was only a whisper down here. We walked towards the cluster of ghost gums. Their roots were deeply anchored into the dry earth, drawing life from unseen sources. Beneath them, the ground was smooth, covered in fine dust that swallowed the sound of our steps. This place is a natural Sheltera cathedral built by bark and shadow. Mura knelt at the base of the largest. Gummet was immense, its trunk scarred with ancient markings not painted. Markings but carvings made deep into the wood, telling stories without color. He took a handful of the fine dust, letting it sift through his fingers. It must be acknowledged dust. That holds all those who walked before, walk on their breath, their skin, their dreams. He reached into his small pouch, pulling out a piece of dark red ochre, precious pigment gathered many miles away. He broke off a small piece, mixed it with a drop of water from his tongue, greeting, a paste the color of old blood. He marked my forehead, my chest, my arms with simple lines of protection and recognition. Mark was cool and heavy, a velvet blessing. You're a cloak now in the color of the earth, he instructed you. Are cloaked in the memory of the ground. You are not a visitor or a returning of the story. Sat beneath the silent trees. As the light faded, the change from day to night was swift in the desert. The long blue twilight vanished, quickly replaced by the astonishing depth of the sky. Stars came out like powdered quartz, millions upon millions of white ancient lights. Ancestors' fire above us was brilliante. Blackness between the stars was profound, and absolute Mura began to speak, not directly to Mabu, to the air, to the silence, to the trees themselves. He told the story of this seven-sister show. They fled across the sky, pursued by the hunter spirits, their journey mapped onto the dark dust of the Milky Way. He spoke of the Emu constellation, largest shape in the sky, not made of stars, but made of the absence of stars. Dark shapes that hold the true meaning. This night is the testing, he murmured. The final lessons are learned not by moving, but by being perfectly still. He pointed to a shape on the ground near the tree roots, a low mound of stones covered in dry moss. This is the resting place of the law speaker on, who walked this path many generations ago. We are camping within his silence. We draw strength from his quiet vigili, lay back on the soft, cool dust. The smell of the gum leaves was sharp and resinous. The universe seemed to be leaning down toward us, a slow, hypnotic turning of the star fields. My body felt light and strangely weightless. The long, slow walk had stripped away the useless noise of the world, leaving only the essential connection. I looked up at the stars and imagined the vastness of the journey they represented, the journey the spirits made from the earth to the sky, and the cycle of their return. Mura started a low, steady chanta sound that seemed to come from the deepest of the ground. It was not loud, but it vibrated through the air, a humming that spoke of creation and continuation. The chant was rhythmic, slow, repetitive, a perfect lullaby of history. It spoke of the giant goanna who shaped the sandhills, of the honey ants who taught the people about storage and patience, of the carpet snake who guards the deepest pools of water. Each word was heavy with meaning, not just sounds, but containers for thousands of years of teaching. I allowed the chant to wash over me, did not try to analyze the words. I simply absorbed the rhythm, the intention, the deep hypnotic drone. My eyelids grew heavy like ancient stone slabs. They fought the pull of the endless sky, but slowly, gently yielded. The light from the stars seemed to enter my vision now, as sharp pinpricks, but as slow spreading clouds of faint luminescence. I thought about the concept of the eternal return to walkabout, ending only to begin for the next generation. The path does not disappear, it merely waits etched into the memory of the land. My breathing became deep and evident, a slow, steady rhythm matching the elders' chant. The velvet darkness held you safe, cloaked in the knowledge that we were exactly where we needed to beat the foot of the ancient cliff, prepared for the final. Viewing sleep was a gentle, slow drift, a surrender to the deepest of the desert night. The stars wheeled above silent witnesses to the unending dream. The ground beneath was hard but comforting, a vast cradle rocking us gently toward dawn. Elder's song continued steady and low, a slow current pulling consciousness down into the dark water of the ancient mind we were nearing. The place of the final understanding, hill where the path of the ancestors revealed in the rising sun. But tonight was for deep rest, a gathering of strength beneath the hushed stars, a slow, patient wait for the truth held in the light of the morning. The air grew crisp and cool. The ghost gums stood white and still, guardians of the slow sleep in the deep dream of the land. Slow turning of the earth felt perceptibly, a massive, heavy motion that defined time itself, not in seconds or minutes, but in epochs and cycles. I felt the connection to the spirit of the walkabout, not just the journey, but a deep immersion into the eternal. Sound of an unseen night beard, a soft, low, callow voice from the darkness, a reminder that even in the deepest sleep, world is awake and watching. The dust settled, everything in perfect stillness. The scent of dry earth and ancestral tima, profound sense of peace, a deep understanding of belonging to the land that holds us, in its ancient slow embrace until the rising of the amber light. Once more, Edo, guide our final steps toward the sacred pinnacle, end of the walkabout path, which is only the beginning of the true life. Learn beneath the cloaked desert sky, the ancient dust welcomed the sleeper, a soft cradle of Time holding the knowledge of a gezin, its slow, silent heart, a velvet darkness, a hushed sleep, a deep, deep rest. Cold air rushed up from the earth floor, a breath stolen from centuries. Gone it smelled of dry chalk and powdered silver, a hushed scent. Of deep time, the stone sighed deeply beneath the pressure of your palm that had seemed solid hours ago. Now yielded inward a whisper of turning gears, slow, heavy, almost unheard. A seam of light thin, like polished thread, began to show along. The cracked mortar, it was not sun or torchlight, it was an inner glow, utterly contained, pure amber you. Knelt low, placing your ear against the widening gap, listening for movement or warning only. The sound of your own quiet heart beat a slow, steady drum against the stillness of the subterranean world. This hidden chamber, whatever its demanded silence, demanding a respect deeper than fear, a reverence for the things that sleep beneath the soil. You pushed the stone panel further and slipped. Through the narrow opening, the space inside was vast, but utterly velvet black. No dust motes swam in the amber light for the light itself was the source, not merely a reflection of something outside. It poured from a circular disc resting on an ancient pedestal low to the ground, radiating a gentle heat. It felt warm upon your skin, a comforting weight after the damp cold of the passageway. The room was circular, carved from a single seamless block of granite, its surface etched with symbols you could not immediately read. They spiraled upward toward the invisible ceiling, like smoke or missed names, maybe dates, maybe coordinates of forgotten stars that burned out long ago. It was a library without books, a chamber of memory held only in the stone itself, its hard, cold shell guarding soft knowledge. The air here was different, thick and heavy, like breathing in melted honey or pulverized incense. It pulled at the edges of your awareness, blurring the sharp lines of reality, making the past feel as close as your breath. You knew you should move quickly, find what you came for, the key, the scroll, the answer that ended the long search, but the amber light held you anchored, gently cradled in its hypnotic warmth. You walked slowly toward the pedestal, your feet barely disturbing the fine powdered residue on the floor, a silt of history, the fine dust of vanished empire says. You neared the glowing disc. You saw the writing upon it, clearly defined by the inner fire. It was not Latin or Greek or any tongue known to modern scholars or historians, yet your mind understood the shape, the implication. The sheer gravity of the message without needing translation spoke of the sleepers, not those who merely slept the common rest of night, but the ancient ones, the cloaked watchers who waited beneath the roots of the world, the true foundation of quietude. Their watch was the source of the silence, the hidden guard against the chaos that always threatens to rush in. The disc pulsed slightly, a slow inhale and exhale of light, drawing you closer, slowing your breath to match its rhythm. Whisper came, then not through your ears, but directly into the core of your quieted mind, sharp and clear against the velvet quiet. Seal is broken. The watch must resume you. Reached out your fingers, hovering just above the smooth surface of the amber stone, almost touching the ancient power. It hummed softly, vibrating with accumulated time, with the echo of countless years. Decision weighed heavy in the stillness. Should you touch it? Should you absorb its knowledge? Should you leave it undisturbed, a secret safe for 1,000 years more? Air grew colder, a strange contradiction to the warmth of the disc. A sudden sharp contrast. A shadow moved at the very edge of your vision, quick, fleeting, gone like a fish darting under a stone. Not the shadow of the door you came through or your own movement, Deeper, more substantial darkness that coiled away from the light, refusing to be touched by the amber glow you drew. Your hand back, a sudden jolt of primal instinct, warning you away from the brink of intrusion. Whatever was in this room was not alone. It was waiting. The message of the sleepers lingered. The seal broken now demanded action. You turned slowly, scanning the granite walls, now illuminated softly by the hypnotic glow of the disc, and there etched into the ceiling far above you saw it, waiting for your gaze, a massive eye, carved in relief, its lid heavy, its gaze fixed directly downward upon the amber pedestal, the silent judge. But around the eye were faint scratch marks, shallow, recent, almost missed in the hypnotic light. Someone else had been here, and they had left a warning or a sign of passage. A deep, chilling realization settled like frost on your shoulders, weighing you down. You were not the finder, you were the bait drawn in by the light. The ancient mechanism of the room was now activated, and the door through which you entered had silently vanished without a whisper. No sound of stone grinding, no click of hinges, just a seamless return to granite, to the flawless wall. You were sealed inside this chamber of hushed amber light and watching eyes. Only way forward was down deeper into the earth, into the black unknown that waited. Beneath your feet, the pedestal began to sink slowly, effortlessly into the floor, revealing not more stone, but a spiraling darkness below the light, retreating with the decay. Staircase carved from basalt rough underfoot, leading into the deep unknown. A silent path. The sleepers waited there. The broken seal whispered their name, their ancient song. You had to follow the light source, the only visible path into the continuing mystery of the earth. The chamber hushed its final breath, a preparation for the long drop into the velvet quiet below. Last thing you saw before descending was the slow, steady flicker of the ember disc, still pulsing, its ancient hypnotic beat drawing you downward into the silent cold where history waited for its awakening. The air grows heavy with the scent of forgotten sleep, slow, deep, eternal slumber. The cold stone ridge breathed heavily beneath the quiet of the final morning. The air was liquid, glass sharp and clean, slicing through the lingering dreams. The dreams were not the frenetic colors of sleep, but the deep, slow messages of the land itself. They spoke of the rivers hidden beneath, the baked earth of the kangaroos bounding through. 100 generations of moonlight. They spoke of the great knowing the time before the time when all was soft light and creation song. Dust of the walkabout settled now not on the skin, but deep within the spirit. This was the end of the long traveling. The culmination of the slow, deliberate pacing. Arenda sat cloaked in the simple, quiet dignity of survival. The fire he had nursed through the long dark hours was now just a whisper of white ash smoking gently into the vastness. He felt the millions of years of rock pressing up beneath him, a solid foundation, a mountain of memory far. Far to the east, the black velvet curtain of the night began to tear, not suddenly, but with agonizing slowness. Thin line of pure luminescence appeared, signaling. The dawn makers, the color bled upward, a delicate wash of palest rose staining the highest clouds then. The rose deepened into a fierce gold and amber fire spreading across the horizon. It was the final sign, the fulfillment of the journey's promise. The moment the sun broke free of the earth's curve was a silent explosion of light, and warmth it flooded the immense landscape below, revealing the labyrinthine secrets of the canyons and the ancient paths etched across the desert floor. The shadow of the great peak where we're underrested stretched out miles long, a tapering finger pointing back toward the ancestral home. He saw his own long shadow merging with the shadow of the mountain. They were one now, the traveler and the territory he felt. The songline vibrating beneath his feet, a low resonant hum, it was the sound of the ancestors moving through the deep time, the echo of their feet. Following the roots of the dreamtime serpent, he had walked their steps. He had drunk the water they blessed. He had slept under the same hushed sky. The songline was complete within him. It was no longer a map to be followed, but a knowledge to be carried. Eyes traced the path of his arrival days ago, weeks ago, months ago. The distance was immense. The memory vast. He remembered the scorching heat of the central plains, the shimmering mirages that danced like mischievous spirits. He recalled the unexpected rain that turned the red dust briefly into dark clay, soothing and cool. He recalled the patient hunting, the quiet tracking, the shared silence with the creatures of the bush. Every hunger, every thirst, every doubt had been a teacher. The land had stripped away the unnecessary layers, leaving only the core truth. He was this immense system, a small yet vital thread in the weaving of the continent. The sun climbed higher, pouring warmth onto the back of his neck, banishing the final remnants of the desert. Chill, he stood slowly, his muscles protesting slightly, the legacy of the long journey. He turned to face the vast expanse of his future, his belonging. The air tasted different now, not just air, but the breath of his country. He felt the weight of his years lifting, replaced by the heavy, quiet weight of responsibility. The responsibility to remember, to honor, to pass on the deep lore earned through slow, deliberate passage. Began the descent, not rushing, not eager, but with the measured, thoughtful tread of a man who understands gravity and permanence. The smooth granite rock faces were warm beneath his bare solace. He moved carefully, winding down the steepest paths, following the track that only the initiated could perceive. The track was not visible to the casual eye. It existed in the spacing of the boulders, the bend of the wattle branches, the slight change in the color of the ironstone. It was a path known through feeling, through innate understanding. He was moving back towards the camp, towards the elders, towards the community he had left as a boy and returned to as a man of knowledge. As the landscape changed gradually as he descended, high dry scrub gave way to denser gum trees, their bark peeling in soft strips of gray and white. The sounds of the morning began to assert themselves, the chatter of the parrots, flashing brilliant turquoise and red, the low coo of the distant native pigeon, the rustle of unseen marsupials moving through the undergrowth. It was the music of home, the orchestra of the Australian bush playing a slow welcome. Each sound was a name. Each name of the Songlines stopped beside a deep rock pool hidden beneath a cluster of ancient shady river gums. The water was clear black and still reflecting the pale blue sky. He knelt slowly, scooping the water into his hands. It was cool and vital, washing away the final remnants of the dust of the highest ridge. He looked at his reflection. His face was thinner, darker, etched with the history of his solo travel. The eyes were clear, deep, and quiet. The fear had gone replaced by the stillness of deep comprehension. He saw the ancestor in his own reflection, the unbroken chain stretching back beyond memory. Took a long, deep drink, savoring the metallic freshness. This water had been his companion throughout the journey, appearing miraculously. When the need was greatest, it was the lifeblood of the land, sacred and sustaining. Rose feeling renewed, stronger, not physically necessarily, but spiritually grounded. The long walkabout was officially over, but the journey of knowing would continue. For the rest of his days, the knowledge was carried internally, now a permanent of his being. He walked for hours, moving always with that deliberate, focused rhythm. The sun reached its zenith, casting short, hard shadows directly beneath the trees. The heat intensified, but it did not burden him. He had learned to move with the heat, to breathe with the land, to let the environment flow through him. The journey had taught him patience, the infinite patience of the slow-brewing stone, the slow-moving river. Was meaningless when time itself was measured in epochs. He began to see the subtle signs of human presence, a broken branch that was clearly not natural damage, a slight depression in the soft earth indicating a fire that had been deliberately extinguished. It was nearing the boundary, the sacred line, where the solitary journey merged back into the communal life. Profound sense of relief washed over him, mingled with a deep humbling. The separation was necessary for the growth. The reunion was necessary for the future. Finally, through the heat haze and the dancing light, he saw it, the faint slow wisp of pale blue smoke rising steadily above a low cluster of sheltering rocks. Was the smoke of the campfire the signal of the waiting family, the gathering of the tribe? The smoke was a physical presence, a beacon, a silent promise of welcome. Paused just outside the view of the camp, taking one final moment for solitary contemplation. He touched the ochre that remained on his forehead, the faint markings of the rituals he had performed alone. He was clean now, ready to present himself whole and transformed. He stepped out from the sheltering trees into the clearing. The sight of the camp was simple yet overwhelming. The familiar shapes of the small shelters, the smell of cooking meat, the murmur of voices low and soothing. Several figures were moving quietly, preparing for the heat of the afternoon. Children paused in their play, their eyes wide, solemn. The elders were seated near the central fire, their faces turned toward him, silent, expectant. An old woman stood slowly, her face with wisdom and deep affection. She was the keeper of the stories, the main guide of his youth. She did not rush forward. There was no frantic emotion, only a slow knowing. Smile, a silent acknowledgement. She spoke a single word in the ancient tongue, a word that meant simply found. He walked toward her, slowly, deliberately placing his feet precisely on the ground. He reached the fire circle and knelt before the elders. His head bowed, not in submission, but in respect. The chief elder, a man whose eyes held the entire history of the Dreamtime, raised a hand. He did not ask questions. He did not require a verbal account. He simply looked into Warenda's eyes, reading the journey there. He saw the dust, the heat, the loneliness, the deep, quiet discovery. He saw the knowing the elder gave, A low grunt, a sound of satisfaction, of completion. Circle was unbroken, the lore was past, the spirit was renewed. Warunda felt the cool earth beneath his knees, the warmth of the fire on his skin. He was home. Walkabout had led him not away but deeper within the heart of his people and the core of the ancient continent. Had finished the story, the slow walk, the long sleep of transformation. He was cloaked now in the mantle of his heritage, of the endless rhythm. Story ends here, not with a final dramatic flourish, but with the deep hushed peace of arrival. The journey is over sleep, now sleep. Deeply knowing you are. Held by the ancient land, the dust beneath the soft hide, moccasins cooled. Now a deep velvet whisper against the approaching dark era, halted by the lip of the Gorgia, carved sandstone. Amphitheater bathed in the last amber light. This was the place. He murmured final turning of the dreaming wheel Kai, felt the gravity of the stone itself, drawing him down a pressure in his chest. That was not fear, but a profound recognition. The air here was utterly Husheda, silence thicker than any night shadow he had ever known. It was the silence of deep time, of ancestors listening. This place held the memory of the first Ferevi, first shaping of the world. When the great serpent shifted, they stood on the edge, overlooking a vast hollow where the rock face was painted, not with simple figures, but with the pure flow of the songlines themselves. Of years of slow patient etching, the ochre seemed to breathe, and the guying sunreds and whites and yellows, vibrating softly like heartbeats, slowed to geological Timagura, pointed a crooked finger toward a shallow cave mouth. The journey ends inside, the knowledge begins there. He did not rush, did not speak quickly. Every syllable was weighted with the dust of centuries. We walked the path of the emu and the kangaroo. We followed the tracks of the ancient water spirit. Now you must walk the path of the soul, its Alfonsin, unheard, unbounded. Kai knelt first, tracing the pattern of the wind on the smooth rock. He felt the millions of microscopic deaths and rebirths, endless slow decay and creation inherent in the land. He breathed in the scent of dry iron and crushed eucalyptus leaf, a smell that was Australia, eternal and profound. This was the culmination of the walkabout, a destination marked by water or shade, but a point where the physical dissolved into the spiritual gira. Began a low chant, a sustained huminga sound that settled into the bones rather than the ears. It was the sound of the earth. Turning slowly, the vibration carried the story of creation, how the sun walked across the sky and made the shadow show. The moon pulled the waters and measured the sleeping hours. Kai closed his eyes, letting the sound dissolve the boundary between him and the stone. He saw the lines of the song line stretching back, not just years, but into the very formation of the continent. The knowledge was not taught, it was absorbed, it was felt through the soles of his feet. The elder placed a hand heavy and warm on Kai's shoulder. You sought the ending of the journey, the completion of the task. There is no ending, he whisperingly, the continuous unfolding. The dreaming is now, it is always now. Walk the ancient path, not to find a finish line, but to remember. We are already home. We are already the stone, the sky. The water Kai opened his eyes and saw the world differently. Colors were deeper, the shadows sharper. He saw the pattern of the wind moving the sand, not as random movement, but as deliberate storytelling. Understood why the ancestors etched their story so deeply. It was to anchor the fleeting human life till the eternal constant life of the earth. They moved toward the cloaked entrance of the cave. The darkness inside was absolute. At first the velvety blankness that swallowed all sound, and like lit a small fire using dry spin effects and careful friction. The small orange glow fought back the infinite darkness, revealing the inner sanctum. The walls were coated in deep red ochre paintings. They were not images of hunting or daily life. These were maps of the star celestial diagrams etched with painstaking care. These are the paths of the sky ancestors, Gura said, his voice dropping even lower at the other half of the songland. The path we walk in, the daylight is reflected above us at night. Our home is mirrored in the heavens. Milky Way is the river of Souls, and every star is a resting place, a waypoint, a memory. When you sleep, Kai, your spirit walks among these stars, traces the paths the ancestors laid out in the dark sky. You must learn to read the night map as clearly as you read the tracks of a wallaby in the sand, Kai. Gazed up at the painted ceiling, he saw the constellation of the great hunter. The knowledge flowed into him of how the seasons changed, how the position of the stars dictated when the yams would be ready, when the rain would arrive. He realized that the walkabout was training for the night preparation, for the spiritual journey that occurred every time the body rested. It was a deep integration of terrestrial and celestial knowledge. Egara pointed to a specific cluster of tiny dots. These are the eyes of the ancestors. They watch, they wait, they offer guidance to. Not seek their voice in the roaring wind or the harsh daylight. Seek their wisdom in the hushed stillness of the deep night where the earth breathes slowest breath. Kai sat back against the cool stone floor. Fire crackled gently, a small, soothing rhythm. He felt the entire weight of his journey settle upon him. Exhaustion, the revelation, the profound peace. He had walked thousands of miles to learn that the distance was zero. He had traveled far to discover the truth waiting inside him. He watched the shadows play across the etched stone. The figures of the sky beings seemed to shift and dance in the flickering warmth of the fire. They were inviting him into their slow, eternal movement. Gura began preparing a final ceremony, a mixing of sacred ochres with water from a hidden spring. This final application was not for decoration, it was for protection, for final acknowledgement of the kinship. He painted slow, deliberate stripes of white clay across Kai's chest and brow. Each stroke was a prayer, a blessing, a transfer of responsibility. The white clay felt cool and smooth against Kai's warm skin, a tangible connection to the earth's purity. It smelled of clean mineral and ancient rock. With this, you are cloaked in the dreaming, he instructed you. Carry the stories within your skin, not just your mind. You are the bridge between the old ones and the ones who will come after you, are the vessel of the song. The silence stretched profound and comforting. Kai felt his eyelids growing heavy with the weight of sleep, but it was a conscious sleep, a spiritual. Entering, he understood the deep meaning of resting on the land. It was not merely recovery, it was participation and dropping into the frequency of the dreaming itself. He listened to Gura's slow, steady breath. The elder was the anchor, the keeper of the rhythm. As the fire began to diminish, the ochre paintings receded, slightly booming whispers in the surrounding dark vastness of the cave embraced Thema womb of cool, protective stone. Kai lay down on the soft bedding of dry leaves and bark. The stone floor beneath him was warm from the day's sun, radiating a slow, steady heat. Closed his eyes, and immediately the stars on the ceiling became real. He saw the river of the Milky Way stretching across his inner vision. He was floating, now lifted away from the heavy gravity of daylight worries. His spirit was tracing the celestial songlines, following the paths of light and shadow in the eternal night sky. He heard the deep hum of the earth beneath, Hema resonance that calmed every nerve, every musculature. Final words echoed softly in his memory. You sought the knowledge of the long walk. The true knowledge is the surrender. Letting go of the self into the flow of time. The earth will hold you. Ancestors will guide you. You are the story. You are the dreamer. Let the long journey of the day settle into the deeper journey of the night. Let the ancient songline carry you slowly through the dark hours. He imagined the slow, steady pulse of the sun rising on the other side of the world and setting, here giving way to this hushed velvet darkness. The darkness was not emptiness, it was pregnant with potential, with unmanifested light. He felt himself sinking deeper into the soft sleep, protected by the stone cloaked in the sacred stories. His breath became one with the slow, gentle shifting of the desert air outside. A cool breeze ghosted into the cave, carrying the scent of dew and ironbark. It was a slow rhythmic breath out, and a slow rhythmic breath in the ultimate rhythm of earth itself. In his mind's eye, he saw the path they had walked, the desert plains, the rusted ridges, the silent water holes. They were not just geographical markers, they were lines of music notes and a continuous composition. He was an instrument tuned finally to the land's own frequency. The final lesson was simplicity, acceptance of being small against the backdrop of eternity, recognition that his individual life was just a single shimmering thread in the ancient durable cloth of the dreaming. He let go of every thought, every worry, every lingering question. Bay floated away like smoke from the low embers, leaving only the profound peace of knowing his place. He was here, now home held by the ancient stone. World outside the cave was slowing down. To the moon rose high, casting long silver shadows across the gorges. The nocturnal animals moved with a deliberate, slow stare. Senses sharpened, their movements soft and measured. The air temperature dropped, creating a delicate balance between warmth held by the sand and the cool flow of the night air. He felt a deep calm of integration. The long walk was over. The real journey had just begun slow. Quiet, continuous journey of being. He sank deeper into the comforting oblivion, safe and secure. Within the ancient walls, the last flicker of the fire danced on the ceiling, a final amber glow before surrendering to the dark. Heard the faint distant sound of a dingo cawing, a soft, lonely, beautiful sound that emphasized the vast quiet it was. A lullaby carried on the cool night wind. He welcomed the silence, the darkness, the deep, slow pull of rest. He was of the stone now, of the song floating, drifting, carried along the endless. Songly off the sky, ancestors, softly, slowly, deeply descending. Into restorative sleep, the ancient journey finished, the eternal rest begins. Velvet darkness envelops him fully. He sleeps, the story is completed. The walkabout is done. Rest deeply. Deep breath was the final lock on fastened heavy ancient. Door of the mountain yielding not with a crake, but with a hushed exhalation of cold air. The air smelled of deep time off, limestone, dust, and rain that fell centuries before you. Step now onto a floor of velvet moss that cushioned your every silent movement. This was the Karethi slow-beating heart of the silent Seth. Place the journey always sought the silver light. It was not moonlight now, it was inherent. It glowed from the very stone itself. A soft amber, radiant set pulsing, just slow, just enough. The path you had followed was gone behind you, folded away. Like old silk leaving only the forward space and the monumental sense of you stood centered in a chamber not built by hands, but sculpted by waiting. It was vast yet profoundly intimate. The walls were not walls, they were cliffs of quiet memorized with patterns so complex they defied understanding. You did not need to understand them, you only needed to witness their perfect stillness. Across the moss floor lay the destination, Anoltruthe. Single circle of pale granite worms, smoothed by endless, uninterrupted hours of quiet contemplation. The circle was empty of artifacts of gold, of answers, spelled out loud. It was simply a vessel. For rest, you approached the granite, slow each footfall, settling into the earth, a final acknowledgement of the long, slow road. The air felt thick like cool honey, moving with the utmost reluctance. You lowered yourself gently onto the edge of the ancient stone. The granite was cold, but immediately it offered back a slow, steady warmth, a shared pulse with the earth beneath you. Felt the weight of the journey lift from your shoulders, not violently, not rushed, but like a shawl of heavy wool gently. The cloaked figure had walked beside you in dreams and guided you through the misty lowland, stood now at the threshold of the chamber. Hood was drawn low, but the posture was one of complete reposia, quiet guardiano, longer needing to guard. The figure lifted a hand not in good view, but in a simple blessing off peaceth, and slowly as if woven into the shadows themselves. Figure dissolved back into the stone, back into the air of memory, accepted. This knowledge was the slow culmination. There was nothing left. To seek the truth was not a fact. The truth was the perfect quiet that follows the long effort. Understanding that the destination was always the ability to stop. Etched lines on the cliffs began to softly glow, a slow parade of silent pictures flickering. Like fireflies, they were not warnings, they were not historious, they were simply a light playing on stone telling. Tales without sound, tales of rentals of trees growing, slow tales of oceans moving always, but always returning you. Lean back slightly onto the cool solid granite. The back of your head finds its perfect resting place. The muscles in your neck release their long tension, deep settling gawkers. In your chest a sigh that is silent but felt through the very ground. You look up the ceiling of the chamber. Is higher than any cathedral. It is not darkness above it. It is a deep, deep blue like velvet steeped in indigo. Die millions of tiny pinpricks of light distant. Stars that have watched this chamber for epochs untold. The journey is done. The need to move is gone. The need to think is gone. Only the breath remains loused and rayed in the peace of the silent chamber, releasing the last wisps of the waking world. You Feel utterly secure held within this ancient space where time moves only when heart allows. Aing tonight heart has Jacinto move very, very slow. The silver light softens, further becoming almost indistinguishable. The dark blue air, the air itself, cradles you a gentle, hypnotic weight, a lullaby of profound quietude. Let the memories of the long path, amber sunsets, hushed markets, winding stone roads, let them float, now like leaves on a still pen, beautiful to look hot, meeting to beheld you. Our heavy, now perfectly heavy answered to the stillness of the earth, the granite beneath. Yui an assurance, a promise of deep, unwavering rest. Close your eyes fully now. The light is gone, but the inner glow. Warmth of arrival remains. Long, slow sleep begins in this perfect, quiet chamber etched in the heart of the world, where the travelers the ways find. Their peace, their deep, soft peace, you drift, you fall, you sink in. A final word spoken softly into the edge of your profound quietude is one natural hand, the telling of this long, slow teleus, complete, the journey through the etched lands, cloaked. Mysterious, the silent stone city etches come to its peaceful end. You have traveled so far, your mind has walked the long miles, and now it does rest the deepest repose. Thank you for walking with Methral. Our soft night for sharing the slow rhythm off. The stories that live within the oldest stone, may the stillness you have founding this final chamber mine with youth, row the whole nighta. Comfort a soft blanket, a profound sense of mind, exactly where you should be sleep now, deeply sleep without interruption. Eh? Your dreams be silent and amber tone, may your rest be long and restorative. We bid this journey in this Surya said gentle farewell may. The quiet wisdom of the ancients watch over your slumber tonight, and always go soft. Now, go quiet, go deep, sleep well, dear traveler, sleep. Well, until the slogan-looking light finds you. Go now, go quiet, go deep sleep, leap, leap.